Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the India Impact Communication Conclave, the Women's Day Special, presented by Comms News and powered by Reputation Today. My name is Anubhuti Mathur, and I am the Content Director at the Promise Foundation, which runs Reputation Today and Comms News. And I will take you through the sessions for today. This is the second edition of the Women's Day Special, where we invite over 25 women leaders from the public relations and corporate communications space to share insights on a variety of topics. Today, we will listen to discussions on topics ranging from gender equality to women and leadership, from mental health to fighting biases and prejudices, and more. This conclave is put together by a group of volunteers who form part of an extended team at the Promise Foundation. We'd like to acknowledge their support. Thank you, Julia Joseph, Sarika Chauhan, Shreya Krishnan, and Amita Vadera. You will see all of these volunteers during the course of the conclave, either moderating panel discussions or otherwise. They have devoted their free time, despite having full-time day jobs, to help put this together. Before we begin, we'd like to thank our supporting partners, Ideosphere Consulting, ICCPL, Kalolwala and Associates, Seraphim Consulting, Talking Point Communications, and the Pivotals. We would also like to acknowledge the active participation of students from the School of Communication and Reputation, SCORE. In case you're posting on social media, the hashtag for today is hashtag IICC 2022. That's IICC 2022. In case you want to catch these 5 sessions later, subscribe to and visit our YouTube channel at bit.ly/RT-on-YT. Without further ado, let's head straight to the first panel discussion of the day. Joining us for a discussion on gender equality today for a better tomorrow are panelists Dhruti Kapadia Krishnan, Global Communications Partner at IGNKA Services, Dimple Raisurana Kapoor, VP and Head of Communications at Pernod Ricard, India, Poonam Thakur, Head of Communications for India and Southeast Asia at Process Ventures, and Shreya Sharma, Head of Communications at ShareChat. Moderating the panel discussion today is Shreya Krishnan, SVP and Head of Marketing and Communications at Aon India. Over to you, Shreya, now.
Thank you, Anubhuti. Thanks a lot. Let me invite my co-panelists. We have all of them joining in. There you go, Dimple, Poonam, Shreya, and Dhruti. Dhruti will join as well. Okay, so the topic for today is gender equality today for a better tomorrow. Let's be honest, no matter what women tend to have achieved in the last many years of trying to get to a space of equality, equity, social justice, equality continue to be talking points because we're not there yet. The gaps are really far away. India is going to take another 140 years to even reach true equality in any form. So that context in the background, I think I'll open this up for everybody for their opening thoughts. So Dimple, I'll start with you, and then Poonam and Shreya, and we'll wait for Dhruti to join in as well. But Dimple, over to you. We'll begin with you.
Great. Thank you, Shreya. And very pleased to be part of this discussion. I think, no better time than now. It's been a burning issue for a while, but only now you see everyone really making strides to actually address this issue, but not just address it, but do something for it. So first of all, good afternoon to everyone that's joined in, and good afternoon to my co-panelists and to Shreya, our anchor. Very pleased to be part of the conversation. Like I said, it's not a binary issue anymore. It is, gender equality across the spectrum. So looking forward to the discussions, and thank you.
Poonam, over to you. Thank you, Dimple. We'll come back to you on the binary piece.
Yes.
Thanks, Shreya, and hello, everyone. like my co-panelist already said, this is a burning issue, and it's the most topical thing today. To what Shreya said, the gender gap is actually not just in India; it's a global gender gap, which will now take 135 years to close. I mean, let that sink in. And just in the last 1 year, that gap has grown by a generation because of the pandemic. So I think I would also like to use this opportunity today to explore how the pandemic has kind of pushed this conversation forward, because I think a lot of people saw how much of an unequal load there was on women, especially with everyone working from home. It is nonetheless also translated into those very women facing real burnout, and 1 in 4 actually wanting to downshift their careers. So I think that's not a very positive note to start on, but it's really something I think we should discuss ideas and thoughts about how we can make it better.
Absolutely poignant thought, not pleasant, not pretty, but absolutely something that we need to focus on today. Shreya, switching gears to you and asking you to weigh in on this one.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm happy to be here and discuss different point of views around gender equality. And I would obviously like to take a slightly positive spin here. I believe that with the growing social media and internet and connectivity, there is growing awareness. We are on this platform at this moment talking about it, addressing those issues. So I do see a glimmer of hope and change that is around the corner. Of course, we all have to come together and do it, not just women, but men as well, to achieve the equilibrium that we're looking for. So, yeah.
Equilibrium is a beautiful word, and I like what you said. This is not a dialogue for women alone, but the men need to be brought in. I'm just quickly checking to see if Dhruti is in the room, and if someone can give me an indication if she's in, because then we'll get her opening comments and move into the first round of questions. Somebody backstage? Okay, moving ahead. So we'll come to the binary thought that Dimple started with. Gender is non-binary. Today, there are 26 recognized genders that exist. And let's be honest, all said and done, the masculine gender seems to have always had an edge, whether it's conditioning, whether it's patriarchy, whether it's the way the world has behaved for so very long. But when you look at women and other minority genders, they continue to be at the receiving end of several forms of bias. And those kind of biases are dictating in some form the world that we're in. And to change that narrative, to make it more diverse and inclusive, what is it that we can do? So Dimple, I'll start with you because the binary piece comes in there. So,
sure. So I think there's a very interesting piece of data that was put together, basis a McKinsey survey that says that the more diverse the organization, the better. There's a stronger positive financial outcome, right? Now, if that is a fact that, diversity brings in diverse perspectives. Hello, Dhruti.
Hello.
Welcome, Dhruti.
I can take a pause if you'd like to introduce Dhruti.
No, I think you had just started on the thought. Then I'll come to Dhruti and I'll move the question to her. She can give her opening comments and respond on the question.
Okay, done. Okay. So like I was saying, basis the McKinsey survey, which says that, financial outcomes are significantly impacted and in the positive due to diversity. And what does diversity really mean? It's not just a binary conversation. Of course, there's women. There's lots more to even bring women into the workforce, right? 50% gender diversity, when we talk about it, it largely depends on, rests with women representation. But I think there's so much more that organizations need to do. And even as a society, whether we make places more inclusive, spaces more inclusive, whether, there's infrastructure, whether there's policies. So yes, there's so much more that we need to do beyond just the women issue. Women itself is a first step, but I think there's been enough conversations that have started on the women inclusion bit. But really, inclusion is a choice where we, Thibaut Cuny, our MD and CEO, recently made a statement, and I'm going to steal that from him. He said, inclusion is a choice that we make to accept diversity, as well as to make the world a better place to be in for all of us, right? So going forward from that thought, how do we maximize each one's potential, not just economically, but also as a society? I think there's so much more, and they've just been isolated, and it's only now that we're beginning to see how we can actually, enhance financial, economic, social dialogues and outcomes.
Absolutely. Dimple, thank you so much. I think there were some really insightful pieces there, especially about how you look at diversity in context of inclusion. So, Dhruti, moving to you, your opening comments on the topic and talking about diversity and inclusion in context of gender.
So I think, thank you very much. Just a quick introduction. I'm Dhruti Kapadia Krishnan. My name itself is quite diverse because I am a Gujarati, born and brought up in Bangalore, but married to a Tamilian, born and brought up in Calcutta. But having said that, I think, thank you so much. I think this whole aspect of diversity and really the future, I think as a theme really, and this is the first discussion, so I think the overall theme this year is really breaking the bias. I think there is still a disconnect between the biases we aim to break and the biases that the system allows us to break. And I think we have a lot of discussions that, keep coming, diverse perspectives, but sometimes the answers, get limited. I do believe that there is a paradigm shift that's needed, and I'm happy to be part of this discussion and hear more from the rest of the panel as well. Over to you, Shreya.
Thanks, Dhruti. Again, some interesting anecdotal references, hopefully from you as we go along, because we've had this conversation before. Poonam, moving and switching gears to you. In context of diversity and inclusion and the way the world is currently designed, you spoke very powerfully about that divide that continues to exist. So if you can talk a little bit about what it is that can be looked at in this context.
I think there's so much to do, right? But at the very beginning, and we talked about this yesterday. I think just the fact that we acknowledge that gender is non-binary, it's very heartening, because at the end of the day, we want to break the bias and we want to make this an inclusive space and an inclusive discussion. And just paraphrasing Gloria Steinem, when she said that the struggle for women's rights for equality, and I'm paraphrasing, is not just a struggle for a feminist, or it doesn't belong just to feminism or to an organization, but it's the effort of anyone who cares about human rights. And that's what it basically boils down to. So when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about diversity, when we talk about giving everybody a seat at the table, a voice in the room, it's about acknowledging their agency, it's about acknowledging their choice. And so just to start with, to acknowledge that there is this bias, there is a gap, and then start talking about what are some of the affirmative actions that we can take, what are some of the what are some of the processes that we can put into place at a personal level, at an individual and at an organizational, and hopefully then at a societal level, that will bring about transformational change. Because I think one thing is very clear, there is urgent action required, and that action has to be now, and it cannot be incremental, it has to be transformational.
Absolutely. Choice, change, transformation, some really agency, some really powerful words in there, really cheering us and edging us towards that change that we really want to see and be. Shreya, you did have a positive spin on this one. So looking forward to hearing from you. What are those things that make you feel like we're on that verge of that transformation?
So I think I have been working in startup space more so, and I've been in large corporates. I've been in a different industry before being in communications. And to be honest, I am seeing change. I am seeing open conversations on the subject. Women also being considered. Of course, I'm not saying it is large scale yet or mainstream. But I do see organizations, especially new age organizations, taking a step towards it. Currently, the whole corporate system is designed not for diverse genders, right? It is very cut and cold, So there is need for softness, for diversity to come in. And I'm seeing the change happen slowly and steadily, where people are introducing, or corporates or organizations are introducing level playing field for everyone, right? Like all genders or everyone has different needs. And if you really want to judge someone on their meritocracy, you need to bring them to a level together. But that level, everybody needs different things. Even
Sorry, something went wrong. Try again in a few seconds.
There's some disturbance, but even
Some
for
background
women,
noise. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, something happened. So even for women, now, for example, I think there are different stages where women then are considered as a shrinking employee, especially when they get married, if they're pregnant, or they are rearing a child. That perception about women needs to be changed. And of course, women ourselves can build that change or bring about that change. Of course, like I said, with support of family, with support of our colleagues, we can make that.
Interestingly, I used to have a retort to this one when I was pregnant and somebody asked me about leave or something like that. I said, you do realize it's only my uterus that's pregnant. My brains are still working. Like my faculties are all functioning. So I bring that back into this conversation. But having said that, Dimple, you spoke about what efforts can we put in to make, see that it starts with yes, inclusion, but do we have enough diversity? What do we do to ensure that it's more diverse? What do we do that workplaces are more diverse? You spoke about that, so we'll start with that on you, and then we'll go around in the circle again.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, even before we get to what can be done, I think let's look at reality, right? If you look at a stock check and say, where are we? Yes, women representation still underwhelming in the workforce. And even if it's at the workforce, it's really a figure that people are striving towards, right? So very few organizations can claim that they have very strong women leaders at the organization, right? So at leadership level, you certainly need to do more, whilst most companies, even society, is looking at more inclusive measures where girls and women are concerned. But I think we need to go beyond just numbers, right? Now look at pay parity. Are we there? Certainly not. Is there an unconscious bias when women speak? Certainly yes. And I think very few organizations, so we speak about all of this, right? It's all women empowerment and stuff, but what are we doing to bring awareness on how to deal with this as a society as a whole? It's not just a woman's problem, it's also a man's problem. So also sensitizing other genders, and it's not just a man woman. Like I said, the gender equality spreads across diverse genders. And so whether it's a trans community, whether it's gender diverse, whether it's man, woman, everyone, actually gender equality is everyone's responsibility. It isn't something that you'd create policies for, create infrastructure, but then if no one's going to bring in the inclusivity in conversations and workplaces and in society as a whole, it's all going to be just on paper. So I think much more needs to be done at a societal level. And of course, for people like us that have a voice, and organizations, forward-looking, progressive organizations are making headway towards this. So whether, like I said, whether it's policies that are more inclusive of the third gender, and saying, yes, can we include it to your partner irrespective of what gender your partner is? Can we create more spaces within both workspaces as well as society that is more inclusive, right? Do we have separate washrooms? Can we make ease of access? If you have a disability, walking in cities like Mumbai, in Bangalore, in Delhi is a challenge because you don't have pedestrian walks, and even if they are, they're all cobbled and they're broken. So even as an infrastructure, when you look at it, so much more needs to be done. And also, I think if you have to foster a culture of inclusivity, the first step really is to acknowledge that there are diverse genders that need to be part of those conversations and constructs. So I think really the first one is to acknowledge that they have an equal right to be where you are and where you have access, both to resources as well as to opportunities.
Absolutely, bring that conversation more mainstream. And what you said brought up an anecdote, which is an interesting one. There are more CEOs named John than there are women CEOs in the world. So that never stops making me feel mind boggled, really. So thank you, Dimple, because you spoke about societal change, policy change, infrastructure support, comes to looking at making workplaces more diverse, more inclusive. Dhruti, passing the baton to you.
Sorry. I think I went on mute probably. So I think taking off from what Dimple said, I think one is acknowledging, but I think somewhere we are quite a society where if it's rewarded and recognized, I think that really creates inspiration, and this inspiration or aspiration also then sometimes leads to action. So here's an interesting thing that I read recently, with where clients were sometime asking their agencies to share their diversity credentials during a pitch process or an RFP process. And I was wondering whether is this really a valuable way to elevate a well-meaning conversation into action, because this is something probably that people have never really thought about. So is it can this something if something like this was to come about, would that really help to make the benefits more tangible, and will that really help diversity become a real focus? I think then, another point that I just also wanted to make, I think, I have formerly worked with an organization where about 70 or 80% of its customers were women. And, for to be able to really have a bright future, the organization did a lot in terms of trying to be able to break stereotypes, not just as part of its advertising campaigns, but also internally. And I probably will share some ideas in terms of what the organization used to do internally as part of their overall equality, diversity, and inclusivity agenda. So we had forums, and I'm just getting a little bit more into tactics or programs that we used to have, and very well coined programs. So we had something called Time to Talk, where people from both genders would really come into a forum and be able to just share what is it that was probably on their mind. So it was just an open forum, time to talk, with just a few outlines. I think a women mentor network definitely goes a long way as well, to be able to ensure that you don't just remind, but you also reinforce. And then I think another one, and I know Shreya, you do quite, Shreya Krishnan, I know you do a lot of it in this space, is really a she for she network, where you have women who are probably more experienced, people who've also had similar experiences, being able to be there for one another and support. So on that note, I'd probably like to hand it back to you, Shreya, because I'm
Yeah,
sure you.
absolutely. Yeah, this is the anecdotal references I was referring to, Dhruti. Thank you for bringing that up. If you notice, there are things that we can do within our own spaces, our own circles of influence, that can really have, while the impact may be at a micro level, it can have like a domino effect, and that really helps. Poonam, switching over to you, it's the same question. How do we do this? What is it that we can do at our level, at organizational levels, to look at diversity and inclusion in a more holistic manner?
Sure. I'd love to share a few personal anecdotes as well, but just wanting to make a reference to what Dimple said, and initially what you talked about, and this is just a thought from what we did at one of my former employers, which is a large global multinational corporation. We always talk about it as diversity and inclusion, but at some point in time, they did this whole focus group and internal exercise, and they decided to switch it back, because they said you have to be inclusive first in order to, then make a case for that diversity and actually see it in action. So I think that is also something that I'm now wired to, to sort of put inclusion before diversity. But of course, both of them sort of, it's chicken and egg, go hand in hand. I think the important thing, and just from that example that we can see is that there has to be intent, and then you have to transform that into action. And I mean, a lot of us will talk, and I can share more about at an organizational level, but I think at a personal level, what I think, what we can do, be an ally. And this is not just for women. This is especially also for men, because as a woman, you need to be an ally and you also need to be an advocate. Dimple spoke about pay parity, which is so true, and we've seen it in our own experience personally. And then when you start managing teams and you see how that pay parity works, you see how women colleagues are probably a little more hesitant and unsure about how to have those conversations. So push them to understand their salary structure, teach them to negotiate harder, negotiate smarter, and encourage them towards a work-life balance. Because when you do that, and then that is not just, again, this is then gender agnostic. You just build a better, more personable workspace, and it works both for men and women. Personally, I think, show up to place. I mean, it's not just, representation matters. And I think, especially for me, it's been like this evolution, because when you start off early, you think of things as tokenism, and then you experience more, you read more, you learn more. And especially being in communications, right? We know the impact of visual communications. We know the impact of transformational communications. And therefore, I feel representation is huge, and organizations sort of need to build those platforms in whatever way that suits their initiatives. Secondly, I feel that there is an opportunity to put KPIs in place. We all talk about what gets measured gets done. So how do you put in measures of identifying the success of your inclusion and diversity programs, then institute processes and make it important to everyone? I think when you make it the leadership team's goals, then you sort of make sure that top down you're, sort of percolating, and that change is really coming through. Yeah, so I don't think I got into too many personal anecdotes, but we can come back to that if you'd like to later.
Yeah, we'll come back to that, but I think I'll highlight the two bits that really stood out for me. One was, of course, advocate it, right? Because you can. And two is, of course, what you said, it has to be top down and it has to be inclusive first. You can have diverse workplaces without inclusion and it's going to bomb. Connecting it to what Dimple had said about, ensuring that diverse workplaces function the way they're supposed to, so they can bring in the kind of performance that they are slated to bring in. Shreya, moving over to you again and getting your perspectives on this, and then we'll circle back.
Sure. From a personal anecdote perspective, see, as a girl growing up, I was looking for examples to look up to. And to be honest, there are far and few. And if at all they were like at a really high level, right? Like if you think about Kiran Bedi, but we all are not going to be Kiran Bedis, right? But we at our own different levels will be who we are. But I was always looking out for such examples, especially earlier on in my career, seeing women who are completely fulfilled, having everything. But that was not always the case. There was always something that was missing. But now I'm seeing that change. I'm seeing that with my counterparts. I'm seeing them taking that effort. I'm seeing families supporting their daughters or daughter-in-laws, husband, wives, everybody coming together to build that success for the women in the family. And I think that, like Poonam was also talking about diversity and inclusion, and I've been seeing these words being thrown around a lot. I hope it just doesn't become another lingo that, that everybody uses, but genuinely some change needs to happen, or there has to be some action that is taken integrally. And I think the most important aspect is empathy, but that is again something that no matter how many policies or rules, regulations you put, even the government passes any bills, till the time there is no true empathy, I'm not sure how much of we are doing would be successful. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's back to the basics, because I think empathy is a conversation that, especially in the pandemic, we've seen so much of an importance in weighing in on. Even brands that have looked at things empathetically have obviously sustained the test of time. And I think that's the same story that we're trying to, in some form, bring into this inclusive workplace that we're clearly chasing. But are we there yet? And there are obviously gaps. So, Dimple, coming to my next question for all of you is, we'll bring the lens a little closer to the industry that we are in. There are gaps. They may not be as much because seemingly on the face, I've been told this so many times, the PR industry is full of women. You've got it all. Your industry is aspirational, but there are gaps. What are those gaps and what can we do to address them? And here I'd ask you to, throw in your anecdotes because I think we need to bust some myths. So let's do that now, ladies.
Yes, happy to. And I think the first thing to do is have honest conversations, which is what we're doing, hopefully. Unless we bring issues to the fore, they'll never be addressed, right? So I think each of us owes that to not just each other, but also to the larger, audiences. I love this one statement that Malala made. She's an advocate for women and education, and she says, I raise my voice not to shout, but to represent those that do not have a voice, right? So I do believe that leaders must take up causes that impact not just them and their teams and their near and dear ones, but really the larger, let's say, segment of society that wants to be in communications. And we can do a bit. I don't think we can say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to change the way the country works. We could, but there is somewhere we start. So if we have to really think about where, each of us can really contribute and look at things that need to happen, the first thing really is, yes, women in the workforce, right? I mean, how are we making sure? And you know how communications as an industry has no hours, right? There are no strict contained work hours, especially if you're in the agency side. And also if you're in a very, very, challenging work environment that has a lot of crisis issues, you don't have regular work hours. Then in that case, what are we as as a corporate entity, across agencies, across corporate entities, what are we doing to make sure that, other genders have it a little easy, right? Because for men, it's probably a little easier because the kids are equally at ease with the moms, blah, blah. I think a little bit of flexibility on how each one functions, and this is not restricted only to women, also to other genders. I think a lot of flexibility, this work from home construct has worked beautifully. Everyone's ready to go. There's been absolutely no impact on economic activity. There might have been because of restrictions in terms of lockdown, but just in terms of productivity, people realize that spending time where you're not torn for your responsibility is a great way to be. So more flexible constructs, whether it's work constructs, whether it's even convivial work constructs, perhaps there needs to be a little more focus there. The other thing I really wanted to put out there is the training and upskilling, right? Mostly, let me talk first about women and then we'll get to the other genders. Also, women typically will put family first and say, if I had to spend 4 hours, I'd rather spend with family. But there has to be a concerted effort in upskilling and retraining sometimes because the world itself is evolving around us. And I don't think we do that very proactively and in a very focused and, mindful manner. So whilst in our appraisals, we have that quotient, each one of us does, right? How much time are you devoting to learning? But in every case, I will tell you there's so much more that each one of us should do and could do. So one is that training and upskilling for women in the workforce. But when you look at the larger diverse genders that exist, I don't think they even have access to education sometimes. So what if you're physically, let's say specially abled and you can't sit in a schoolroom construct, right? There has to be so much more that we do in terms of just imparting. It might not be academic education, but it could be training, upskilling, and special skill sets. Now, is that enough? Perhaps not. Once you create those constructs and you have people that are upskilled and trained, then where are the opportunities where they can actually be, part of the workforce and contribute constructively, positively, and add value to not just their economic status, but also to society.
Yes, absolutely. Some really poignant questions raised there. Dhruti, switching gears to you, I think it's the same question. What are those gaps in our space? What can we do to address them?
So I think every organization, has a code of conduct. So this is really the governing principles on which you need to do. And I do believe that the whole aspect of diversity, inclusion, and even equality need to be built in to that code of conduct. It sometimes requires you not to just initiate and leave, but sometimes mandate.
Yes, I think
Particularly
short and sweet, but mandate.
Yeah. But particularly in an Indian context.
Mandate. Sometimes culture needs to be engineered. Culture needs to be engineered.
I couldn't agree more with you, Shreya.
Yeah, Poonam, coming to you and asking you to share anecdotes if you have any, and to actually call out those gaps and see what we can do to narrow them.
So, specifically then zeroing down on the industry and the domain that we represent, on the agency side, it's been quite a while since, I have been there. So I think for me, the two things that would probably stand out is what we've already discussed, which is the pay parity, ensuring that there is, a parity in the pay structures, and then having very transparent conversations about how do you, nurture and grow women leaders. But the other thing which I'm seeing, and which is again probably an offshoot of the fact that we are in a progressive industry, a lot of policies around equal treatment of maternity and paternity leaves, adoption leaves, at the same scale as a maternity leave. I think those are some very progressive things, and it's really heartening to see the PR industry sort of take the lead on that. I think it's interesting, and Shreya had mentioned this, and it's very true. I think right now there are 3 M's, of which marriage and maternity is something that we all acknowledge and talk about. And then there is menopause, right? I mean, I don't think anybody's talking about it because you think that women have probably burnt out and, exited the workspace, because, that from whatever I read about it and whatever we hear about it, it's not an easy, stage to navigate and transition. And I think, that is probably something that we should, I would actually encourage the industry to think about, that in a more open manner. But just to come back to a personal anecdote, and this is not from a PR industry, it's actually from the startup world, as Shreya mentioned. And sometimes you do the big things, and that's where I really agree with what Dimple and Dhruti also say, that at a personal level you have to, every voice counts, and you have to make your voice heard. So here was this startup that I joined, and it's a very, very micro sort of an example. And they had all these great policies in place. And then there was the women's washroom, which didn't have a dustbin with lids. So I had to go around talking to people about why a women's washroom should have dustbins with lids. And we all know why that should be there. But, it's just one of those things. If you don't have enough, that representation in the system, you don't think of these, everyday problems and challenges and things like that. So which is why, we come back to that point of include and build that slate and build a representative slate, which is representative to Dimple's point and what we've talked about earlier, all gender, like the non-binaries. There are unique challenges and problems that we have literally no insight into. And until, you start talking to them and, really having an open dialogue, it's not something we're going to be able to grapple very, very soon. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my God. That makes you pause for a moment and think of what representation is. Shreya, coming to you. I am on the hour, so Shreya's comment will be the last one, and I'll wrap it up and hand it back to Anubhuti. So over to you.
Yeah. So I feel that PR agencies, and if you're talking about our industry, are, I think, the beginning where we can actually start experimenting and doing things for women, because majority of the workforce is women. They can be the flag bearers of bringing that change, or at least doing the permutation combinations that are required. And another point taken from both Poonam, Dimple and Dhruti is that I think there is a need for training for the transition phases also that women go through, right? Like if somebody is pregnant, they might think that, okay, I don't know how I'm going to deal with it, or how am I going to go back to workforce. There are a lot of myths, there are a lot of misunderstanding about it, and I think both corporates and organizations can work towards building more education for women as well as to the steps that they can take. So yeah, those are some closing points I have.
What are those steps that you can take, really? And there is a question which we'll answer hopefully on Twitter soon. What type of mentorship is being offered by you all to younger women? I have a lot of answers. I know Dhruti, Dimple, Shreya, Poonam, you all would do. So make sure to tweet those answers to Ganesh. He's asking them. We are up on the hour, and Anubhuti is signaling me. But I think on a wrap of today, I just have to say thank you, Dimple, Shreya, Poonam, Dhruti. We've just barely scratched the surface, just, infinitesimally small way as to what this actually is and means. And hopefully we'll get multiple agencies and platforms to continue this conversation, which is so very relevant and important. Thank you all so much for this one. Anubhuti, handing it back to you. If you all have more thoughts, continue to keep the conversation going on Twitter. We'd love to continue to banter up. Thank you so much, ladies. Anubhuti, over to you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Shreya. In fact, thought-provoking conversation there. And thank you to all our panelists, Dhruti, Dimple, Poonam, and Shreya. Thanks once again. So moving on, the next session for today focuses on women and leadership and how can we help build the next line of women leaders. The panelists for this discussion are Amandeep Arora, Associate Director and Head of PR and Communications at MobiKwik; Bhavna Sharma, Head of Strategic Communications and Social Media at Western Digital India; Gayatri Pradeep, GM for Corporate Communications at Bangalore International Airport; Smita Basu Roy, Head of Corporate Communications at Godrej & Boyce; and Sunaina Jairath, Head of Communications at CRED. Moderating the panel discussion today is Sarika Chauhan, Vice President at Weber Shandwick. All eyes and ears on you now, Sarika.
Hello, hi, am I audible?
Yes, Sarika.
Yes.
Hi, Sarika.
Hi, welcome everyone. I think we're still waiting for some of the panelists. What an interesting conversation that we witnessed just a while ago. And I think this conversation takes the lead from that, the same conversation that Shreya had, where we talk about women and leadership. And I think a lot has to be done. Hence, this chat is happening today. Otherwise, it shouldn't have, because we all are great leaders. We do our job like the men do. But then why is the parity? Why is that we still have to talk about it? I'll just wait for if you have any thoughts. Meanwhile, I'll just see if the other panelists. There are two more people to join, Smita and I think Gayatri has to come in. Yeah, Gayatri.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Just a moment. I'll just look for Smita if she is in. I know we have a hard stop. We started a little late, but okay. Anyways, I think we can start with our conversation on this very important topic in our lives. I'm sitting across with so many amazing women leaders here, and I would like to start with one interesting, I would say, a anecdote or a quote that I read from a book that I'm reading currently by Indira Nooyi. I'm sure all of you all must have heard about it, but something I want to know, what's your view? It starts with Nooyi's words, which is, I'll never forget coming home after being named president of PepsiCo back in 2001. My mother was visiting at that time. I got great news for you, I shouted. She replied, it can wait. We need to go out and get some milk, the mother said. So I go out, get the milk, and when I come back, I'm hopping mad. I say, I have great news for you. I've just been named president of PepsiCo, and all you want me to do is go out and get milk. Then she says, the mother, let me explain something to you. You may be president of PepsiCo, but when you step into this house, you are a wife and mother first. Nobody can take that place. So leave that crown in the garage. Now that's quite thought provoking when we talk about leadership and we talk about women needs to be there. Do you think the thought comes from our home, ourselves, our families before we talk about it? Bringing that facet in the organization. Where do you think it starts from in terms of women being in the leadership position? Do you think our families support us or do not, or it could be the other way around, that a woman could be in a great position at work, but when she comes home, she plays the dual role? Hi, Smita. Okay, I was just talking about a quote by Indira Nooyi's chapter, one book, talking about how mother was telling her that you are a homemaker first. You may be the president of PepsiCo somewhere, but right now you need to be a homemaker, a mother, and a wife. So my point is it that it begins from home about what your leadership role of how you are presented versus at work. So if Amandeep, if you'd like to start and say something about this.
So, I would like to say that if I am here, I'm because of my family. So, I'm a single mother. If my parents would have not supported me, especially my mom, to encourage me to go out and work, and that would have not been possible. Of course, when I go home, I'm mother and then a daughter. That role no one can take away. But the support is gradually changing. Parents are realizing the importance, how important it is to women to go out, work, not just work, rise in their field and have a leadership position. So I got that support from my family. So
Bhavna, your thoughts on the same?
Thank you, Sarika. Very pertinent question. So, see, I see support and everything is all that really nice and important. But what I see is that because of these things, there are very deep-seated barriers these play when it comes to woman empowerment or for her, advancement in the career. See, look at the gaps that this cause in a woman's career. A woman is expected to play a mother, a daughter, a wife first, prioritize her family, then her career. And because of that, sometimes she's forced to take those gap in her career. While man gets away with all of this with impunity and focuses on his career. I'm sorry if I'm sounding harsh, nothing against men for this, but that's the unfortunate part. There was this post on LinkedIn a few, I think, couple of months back. Human of Mumbai, it's called, if I'm not wrong. And there was this post about this woman, a bodybuilder, and she had to go for a championship, and she had lost her father-in-law, so she had to go there and stay there for 15 days or something, or for a month, something like that. And she couldn't take her protein, she couldn't have non-veg, she couldn't go to the gym, all those things. So I was thinking, if it were a man instead of her in that situation, would anybody expect him to be there at his in-laws' place for 15 days and not take care of that championship, an international championship? Would we expect that of a man? I'm not sure. I don't know. I am leaving that to you. The problem is that if a woman misses something as small as a PTM, so what is it called? Parent-teacher meeting of her child, she's stigmatized because of that. So while there are a lot of reasons why women are not making it to the top, but I think these barriers, these hindrances are also pulling her back, this prioritizing her family, which is important. But if I don't choose to prioritize my family, if my career is important to me, are you going to be okay with that? That is the big concern. The society, more than her family. So in a family where you're using the same yardstick to measure a man and a woman's responsibilities, what is expected of them, unfortunately they are still anomalies. They are abrasions to the rule. That's not standard thing. So I think these are some of the reasons that women are held back when it comes to their career advancements.
True. So there are very pertinent point you would like to add to this, what you're trying to say about Virat Kohli?
No, actually, not taking any names, but what Bhavna said is very relevant. A bodybuilder whose father-in-law passed away, and she had to I mean, it was expected that she would prioritize that over anything else, whereas any male sports person, and it's not just his example, you will hear multiple examples like this, that, when a male sports person prioritized his match or his, training over a tragedy in the family, they are eulogized as, made of grit and what's the kind of determination they have. It's usually never the other way around, that, oh, you shouldn't come to play, you should be with your family at that point in time, whereas the tables almost always turn when it's a woman sports person, in that. So I think I quite agree with Bhavna's point there.
Thank you. Gayatri, would you like to agree on that? Or you think it happens in the corporate world in similar manner?
Corporate world in a similar manner, I would say, like this generation, at least, the generation of, who are in their 20s now, I see a vast difference to what we've been. I come from the previous generation, and what I have seen is that, the responsibility is right, as said by Bhavna, Sunena, and Amandeep, responsibility is usually, I have two grown up kids, and if they don't turn out to be good, I am blamed rather than my partner. So it is the mother who's usually questioned for, how the children turn up. And I have seen it happen in the previous generations, of how a woman is not allowed to actually speak in a more authoritative tone. You've been told from your childhood that as a woman you should mellow down, you should, respect, give more respect. And whereas a man, if he's more authoritative, is, really applauded for his leadership skills, and he's going to do really well in his life, so it's automatically accepted. So I've seen that happening in the previous generation, but I would say that my generation of mothers, the way we've raised our children, it's equally. Like I give one work to my daughter, and immediately she asks me, "What have you given my brother? Like, what work have you given him?" So that's the next question that comes. So I can see a vast difference to how, they're being raised these days, and I can see the level of confidence that my daughter has today. I didn't have that during her age at all. So I can see that improving so much. She has a role model in me to see and grow. So things are improving, workplace as well. There are more women leaders now. Definitely a lot more to do on that front. But things are, of course, improving and going the right way.
So is it that we are choosing to take it up on us, or do we feel guilty somewhere about this whole upbringing of our kids and taking a step back? Like, Smita, I would like to hear your views on that. I've known you closely, I've seen you work day and night and making sure that you take care of your daughter as well. So your thoughts. You're on mute.
God, we discussed this just yesterday. No, so thanks for that, Sarika. But yeah, so I think it's about the choices you make. Honestly, it's yes, there is an external force that might be making it more challenging. Of course, makes it more challenging. I think we come from a very privileged society, and it's not the same for everyone else. But it's also about the choices that we make. It did I make the choice of not staying back home and being part of my, maybe like a lot of people say they want to see their child grow. uh, did I take that option not to sit back? Yes, I did, and it's a choice that I make, and as long as I stand by it. If you make a choice to stay back and take a sabbatical and just take your career to a point where you want to be at, then that's your choice, and that's a good choice. So I don't think I'm in a position to judge that, but it has to be your responsibility and what you choose for yourself. Um, I am going to still, Sarika, take the privilege of jumping back to your last question, where you said that, does it come from within? Yeah, from the society that you come from, or from the upbringing or the family that you are in. Yes, it does. Of course, it does. I've seen a lot of women who did not have a choice. Like I said, I have a choice, but there are people who don't have a choice, and they have to stay back. So most of the women drop out between their junior and middle management, right? And because of the milestones in our life, um, unfortunately men don't have ovaries, so they can't carry the child, but we do have to do that. And there's some very physically we have to be there, but it's a lot about family and the people around you. And hence I'm hoping that most of the audience today are men and not women.
Exactly. That's the intent. I hope. I think we will get the
Yeah,
stats on how many men were listening to us more than
yeah.
women. Another interesting fact that I came across, while we don't even need to do the research, but like 70% of the workforce in PR industry are women. But when we look at the leadership level, there are barely 30%. What happens to them when they reach the leadership position, and then they probably take a backseat, or you think that something goes wrong at that level? The leaders do not see the potential in the women, or do they misunderstand that this woman is married, she has children, she's probably not able to take this forward? I really need to know your thoughts, because we have many probably younger audience sitting listening to us and would want to learn from us in terms of what is it that we need to do at that level so that we don't lose out on that, the crucial position, elevation, or growth. So Amandeep, again, maybe starting with you, if you like
So,
to share your thoughts.
yeah, thank you, Sarika. So, adding on to what
And
Bhavna and
yeah, if you
Smita
guys
said.
can give your personal experience, anecdotes for us to learn, everybody to learn, that'll be great. Please
Sure,
go ahead,
sure,
Aman.
sure. So thank you so much. So I will add on to what Bhavna and Smita said. So there are mainly two factors behind this gap why women are not in the leadership position. So if the effort required for a male leader to succeed is 1.5x, then the effort required for a woman leader is 4x, because she has to put in 2x at work and 2x at home, and it is so hard. So most of the women tend to give up at different stages of their career, mostly at mid level. I've seen women, once they are expecting, they will not come back to work. And why should we work 4x harder for the same profile the men are into? The second factor is the perception held by top leadership in most of the organizations. So they still think that women will not be able to take tough decisions, they are not good managers, there may be less of dedication from them towards the work because of the multitasking they are doing at home or work front. So I want to share an example, a case study here. So there was this lady, Heidi Roizen, who was a successful Silicon Valley venture capitalist who became the subject of a case study at Columbia Business School. So one of the professors presented half his class with the case study with Heidi's name on it, and gave half of the class the same case study with the name changed to Howard. The student rated Howard and Heidi equally competent, but they liked Howard but not Heidi. So specifically, students felt that Heidi was significantly less likable, worthy of being hired than Howard, and perceived her as more selfish than Howard. So another school, the business school, did the same experiment, and the result came out that Heidi is more assertive. The essence of the research here is that a negative correlation of for women between power and success that come out actually in maybe in India or outside. For men, the relationship is positive. So successful men are perceived more powerful and reward. So fundamental challenge here is that women leadership arises from the mismatch between the qualities that traditionally we associate with leaders, between men and women. So moderately assertive male leader will be well accepted and even considered charismatic, and whereas assertive women on the other hand is judged as being aggressive, not a role model leader. So this prejudice has to change, and I strongly believe that some of the successful big brands being led by women is just a matter of time. Like I work with a female co-founder, and I see the change now where my ideas are well perceived, well accepted. I'm on a decision making table. On every new thing I've been called and taken advice. So there is a change now I see with female co-founders.
Interesting. Gayatri or Bhavna, one of you can just share your views on that.
Yeah, I can share my view.
Yeah.
So yes, as women, we bring a very interesting perspective to any decision making process. And yes, I've my career span is like it's more than 20 years now. So when I started off my career, I've had an instance where when during at least the initial years of career, I've had children very early on in my early 20s. And I've had instances when, I've had a male colleague being promoted rather than me for probably the same amount of work that I've put in, or probably even more than what he's put in. And I was told on my face that, uh, you can chill, you can, go home on time. You have a small baby. It's not going to be easy for you. We need more hours of work to be put in. Might be difficult for you. Where I didn't have the courage that day at those initial years of my career to actually be more assertive and tell them that this is not accepted. And I've learned it the hard way. All these years I've learned it the hard way. So what we need to do now is to actually empower more women who are in our team, who are in our organization, to actually teach them our experiences, tell them that yes, see, have more self belief in yourself, be more assertive, take what you actually you deserve, ask for a raise, ask for a promotion that you rightly deserve. We women, traditionally we tend to actually accept that okay, this salary is enough, this position is
Yeah.
enough, it will give me my personal life and professional life balance. That's okay. We really don't put forth what we require at all. So that's something that we need to teach the next generation, our colleagues as well. I'm very lucky because I report to the chief marketing officer at Bangalore Airport, and she's dynamic. She's the head of our DNI program, and she's a very inclusive person. I see the way she really encourages women employees a lot. And even for Women's Day that's coming up, we have a lot of activities that are coming up, and I'm glad to be part of this kind of an inclusive environment. And especially for airports, how airports are mostly made, it's a
Yeah.
male dominated industry. The whole
Absolutely. Yes.
and to have this kind of an atmosphere here is lovely. And I'm really glad to be a part of it, and I would definitely want to empower more women and teach them my path, and teach them on how they could do better. Thanks.
We'll come to that as well. And I think there's a lot of assumption, like you and Amandeep are saying that about
Sarika,
women.
you're on mute.
Though, am I? I'm sorry. No, I'm not. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are. You are.
Oh, I think. Can you hear me, Bhavna? I think Bhavna has some. Okay. Yeah.
Connectivity.
Anyways, yeah. Moving on. Sunana, would you like to share your views on the same? Then Smita, because I will come to a very interesting personal question also to you.
Sure. So I think to all Amandeep and Gayatri, what they said, I think my only takeaway is that, and the one thing that I have always told my team members, and otherwise also women in the organization, especially those at the mid level, is that women, I think that, and that's a global phenomenon, but maybe more so in Indian or an Asian context, we have a very deep rooted martyr syndrome, and guilt is something we
Yeah.
live with. And you compare this with a man, and I come from a very fortunate position because my husband and I are both equal co-parents. But most women tend to have a very deep-rooted guilt that they live with. So you don't ever feel comfortable either prioritizing your career or even prioritizing your own self over the responsibilities of your home, your office, and everything. And that's something that I've been constantly telling the women that I work with, especially those in mid-level positions, that this martyr syndrome needs to go. You are, I mean,
Right.
we've fed on this diet of Mother India and
Yeah.
everything. Nobody is giving you a bravery award on Republic Day because you've been such a great martyr, and you've prioritized everybody and everything over yourself. Till the time we don't start letting go of that guilt, it is okay to take help to raise your children. It is okay to take help of your co-workers if you have anything challenging at home. It doesn't, and it is okay, most important, to make time for yourself. If you don't start letting go of that guilt and that I have to do everything and I have to do everything by myself, you will burn out by probably the mid of your career. and then you will start taking decisions for your career, for your personal life. That may not serve you very well in the long term. So as Smita very rightly said, that if you've chosen to take a sabbatical, don't be constantly guilty about it. It's your choice and you've decided to do this. And similarly, if you've chosen to put your child in a daycare or in a boarding, or have taken help of a nanny to support you in your child raising, don't feel guilty about it. That's my only two bits to this.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you, and that's what Indira Nooyi says in her books. I certainly recommend everyone to grab that copy and read. It really, like you said, we do feel guilty, but and then we end up losing out on opportunities, and then we feel that why am I losing out? I'm doing everything, but I agree that it's not how you would want. If you are, someone who's inspiring to go beyond and do more, please take help. Smita, your views on the same?
So I understand, Sarika, what you said was that why the difference in the whole leadership from entrance to leadership, right? The dropout. I honestly feel that there are, I mean, whether we accept it or not, there are gender stereotypes at workplace, just
Right.
that which needs to go. But and hence it, our generation is so crucial, right? Because we are the ones who can really impact that change. So wherever possible, I think one should speak up. I speak up, and like Gayatri, I think said a few minutes back that their personality differences, the way you're perceived by other people with the same personalities is different. So if a guy is speaking up, he is being honest, and he is being a very in your face, and not not someone who is mincing his words. But if a girl does that, she's aggressive. But these stereotypes will stay. You just have to ignore it. We're just in that phase, right? We're just making the world a better place for the next generation of professionals, hopefully. Now, second is, I think, women themselves, because of the way we've been brought up, we've been asked to behave in a certain way, we tend to hold back. So I think that ability to have informal networking lacks in us, and that's where critical decisions are taken. So literally there used to be a time when you say, let's go for a drink and let's and then there's a lot of decisions that are taken, and I'm not saying you need to make yourself like that, but don't shy away from reaching out to someone on LinkedIn and asking for advice or seeking some kind of guidance. I've had a lot of people who reach out to me, and most of them are men. I don't have too many women reaching out, and I wonder why that. And then when I read, even when I read Lean In and a couple of similar books,
Yeah.
and apparently it's a
Yes.
problem with women. They just can't network, because also you're double hatting, right? You're just working in office, then coming home, and that's this like a second job altogether. You might have a very supportive partner, but as women also, we are instinctively more, we are the caregivers, so we want to do more, even if our partners are like, we'll take care of it. So I think it's a lot on us as well. That's second. Third is, I think, at the leadership level, you see lesser women, so there's very
Yeah.
little to look up to. So you have to, and hence there's not much that we can seek from people like us. So look for a mentor, which women normally don't do. Speak up. Don't negotiate for your salary or for your promotion. And trust me, even I've done that. Don't negotiate for it when you feel you've already done the job. No, you negotiate for your promotion when you feel you are ready to contribute that much to the organization. You don't negotiate for it after you've already done it. I think we believe that we are great negotiators because we just negotiate for everything else in life, but we are not good negotiators when it comes to workplace. I think when that goes off, the whole gender pay gap, which is a major thing, people look at it as a result of what we do. It's not. It is at the core. If the minute you start being treated equally, and that's a lot on us, then
Yeah.
everything else will fall into place. So yeah,
Right.
I think some of these is something I keep reiterating to the women that I know at workplace.
That was my next question, though, but you answered it
Oh,
right
sorry. I
away.
thought that was my question.
No, no issues, no issues, no issues. It sounds it's absolutely what we need to hear. And Bhavna, your views on this before we move on to the next question, if you can
Yes, please. Like most of the ladies have covered all of it, so I'm going to be real quick. I think the good thing is that on PR or communication industry, at least we have role models. Look at on the PR side, you've got Prema Sagar, who is at the helm of Genesis. Then you've got Sunana Malik in Text 100 or Archetype now. Look at the com side, women sitting here. I don't have to say much here.
Yes,
Com side,
yes,
it is led by women. So the good thing is at least people who are looking at becoming leaders in this industry would have role models. They will have sponsors, and that's the most important thing, not just the mentor. What you need is a sponsor. So I think they would have it, so that's a good thing. But generally the number is, horrendously, I mean, abysmally low. If you look at globally also,
yes,
Fortune 500 companies, it doesn't even touch 7.5%. I mean, man, look at 7.5%. It doesn't even touch that for women in the leadership. And why? There are plenty of reasons. Europe people have passionately written about that. There's data out there, and I want to steer clear of that. But I think some couple of things that I want to touch upon is like Amandeep, Gayatri, Smita, everybody, Sunaina, all of them mentioned it. This double, what is it? Double binder that catchphrase that you use for women. If she's not aggressive, I mean, she's putting her point of view. She's assertive, then she's a dragon lady. If she's nice to people, and I had it a lot in during my reviews, I used to have this feedback time and again and time and again that I'm very soft with my people. So the thing that I used to say that I'm soft, I might not be able to take difficult decision. I don't, I ran away from confrontation. So I said that, look at the performance of my team. If they are doing well, whether I am nice to them, if I'm soft speaker, I laugh too much, or I'm speaking, in a very assertive manner, how does that matter to you? Look at the performance. That's what matters. So I think for us also, we tend to the qualities that people see in us, whatever they think that our personalities are projecting, I think we tend to feel bad about it. We tend to get bogged down by this, and that's human. I think if you're going to tell a man again and again, hey, you're a dragon man, you're a dragon man, you are very assertive, you're aggressive, of course he's going to feel bad about it, and over time his performance is going to take a hit because of these things, the way he's going to speak to his team, or the way he's going to overthink the decision he's taking. So I think because women are prejudiced and they're the one who's shouldering all these things, so
yeah,
somewhere this come into play in our performances also over the period of time. If you're over and over again hearing this, they start to play in your mind. And then I think that's one thing. Other thing that I think for the leadership role is that, like, I think one of us here pointed out already, the confidence. And must have most of us would have read it about this woman CEO and a global woman CEO. She was up for the role, but the board of directors, they called a friend of hers, one of the guys, he called her separately and said, I'm sorry, you're not going to get it because your gender played against you. That, and then she had to quit, and she became a global leader somewhere else, and she was doing fantastically well. But
yeah.
you have to accept these realities. That's the problem. Yeah.
True. It's a harsh reality, and I think we all need to work together to make sure that it changes. And like Smita said, it's in our hands, our generation and the generation after, who's probably watching this and probably seeing how to change things for them. But uh, like Smita gave an example of how she is trying to build her team and build that confidence to go to the next level, what would be your idea of what are the things one must do when they are young, or maybe in a managerial position or a position in executive, and would want to reach a certain level? Like I started off my career with Valerie. She's a great leader, and I looked up to her then, and I'm back in Weber working with her, and I really look up to her, the way she conducts
I'm
herself.
going to
She's
interrupt you there. I'm a Val fan as well. When I started my career with Val.
So exactly, you've known. So it's
I think all
great to
of
work
us
with
are. Quite a few of us are Val fans.
it's great to work with women leaders, and they're amazing. They understand you. They understand both the genders very well, and there's no assumption, or there's no comment saying, oh, what's with you, why are you behaving like this. You can easily have a conversation versus probably working with a man boss. I don't know how it is, or what it should be like. Amandeep, you have something to say?
No, no, I think that's true. Yesterday I had conversation with one of my founders, a female founder. So the heart-to-heart conversation if you're going through any problem. So that's easy.
Yeah, exactly. You can have a heart-to-heart conversation. I don't know why this bias, why this prejudice or assumption that women, like there is this gap of 30% that we say, and that shouldn't happen. There is a problem with the pace, it's not equal, because we assume that we are not probably giving enough time, wherein all of us are working right now while managing our office work, sitting in this panel and talking, and then going back and probably handling our families as well, and probably our spouses are supporting us equally. So it's a lot in our hands as well, how we position, how we speak about it, and how we take this out to the, like I tell my daughter, if she wants to be me or someone like me or someone like any other leader, she needs to do it herself and not expect others to support. But yes, few words for the upcoming generation, please. We can start with Gayatri. What are the 2 3 things you think they should do in terms of learning or skilling or anything? Please share your views. You're on mute.
First of all, we for my daughter, whatever I have learned all these years, I keep telling her, empower yourself, develop those leadership skills. That's something that we don't actually teach our children, real leadership skills, which is going to help her in the long run, for her to
And I think schools also don't teach it. I think they should
schools
have a
don't
subject
teach
on
any
this.
kind of life skills are not actually taught. I really wish schools teach them these skills. How do you communicate, how do you be more assertive, how do you say no to things. These are the things that we need to actually teach our children, so when they come and enter into a workspace, they know where to say no, they know they can be heard as well. That's what I keep telling my team, all members of my team: be heard, speak out, whatever you feel, bring in your ideas, throw in your, I keep telling them, unless and we as women, if we don't put our hands up for everything and say what we want to say, nobody's going to nobody's going to actually wait and until keep asking you again and again. So any opportunity that you get to be heard, please put forth your ideas and be heard, is something that I would all teach my kids, my team members. And we as women, we bring in so much more than men to the table actually. So people think we are emotional, but then we bring in all the different perspectives, the emotional, the empathy that's required, the creative thought process that's required.
Absolutely, yeah.
And even personally, we are very futuristic in the way we think, more than men. We know years in advance, we know how our life is going to be like 4 years later. So those perspectives,
Instinct, yes.
we have that in basic instinct. And
Yeah.
that perspective of changing things in the department or bringing that futuristic view in a department, I think all that can be brought in by a woman. And that's something that I would love to my daughter to become one day, or my team members to become one day, and become great leaders.
Yeah, basically speak up and make sure you're heard. So that's
Yes.
one takeaway is what I understand. Bhavna, your views on this? I remember you saying confidence, so
Yes, confidence. So that's sure, because one thing that I want to tell youngsters, whether especially women here, be confident in yourself. Don't think. What we tend to do is that we see a job, and I'm talking from personal experience, we see a job and we will then match our capability to that job or qualification. Unless we are at 110%, we are not going to apply for that, whether it is experience, qualification.
yeah.
While the men, and I give it to them, even if they're sitting at 50%, they'll take that risk. So I will tell women that be confident, and you owe it to yourself and your future. Don't sit there and wait for the right time. That's not never going to happen. Then you're going to miss it. One is that. Second thing, that for my own daughter, what I believe is that gender parity, we keep talking about it. That's not, it just doesn't end at women getting, in office or getting maybe equal pay. It doesn't even end at that. That's maybe the start of that journey. Well, there was this ad, and then I just happened to watch it I think a month or so back. They were asking questions to men and women, very general question. They started, do you love your dad? Do you love your mom? Stuff like that, very general questions. And then they started asking, when you bought your first car, who made that decision for you? And if that person has taken that responsibility on him or herself, then they would take two step ahead, or otherwise they'll take two step back. Then they ask question about, I think Sunaina has seen it. So then they'll ask question about your insurance. Have you taken your insurance on your own? Or your term insurance, do you have it? Your tax, who files it for you? Are you doing it yourself? And stuff like that. When it came to that financial literacy,
Yeah.
the stark difference that you would see there. The men, all of them, while initially they were going together, the women were two step ahead of them, in fact, in some of the cases. By the end of it, they were standing on two, just different corners. And you could see that's where this whole thing exists, this bias, because somebody is not confident in you, your parent, your family, your society, that Bhavna will be able to make right decision when she's buying her car. Maybe they're not confident in it. They're not confident in my ability to go buy insurance or maybe take those financial decisions. And that's why you start becoming inconfident over the period of time. Then, like those mushy thing that used to float around, I don't know if they still do, like your parents did all this for you, and now when your mom is asking whether she should buy a red sari or a green sari, then you are not scrunching your nose and saying no, because that's what they've done to you. Like their
Yeah.
confidence is gone away, they're not able to take such a small decision that's won the society and everybody else and you yourself. All of you together have done for you. So I think unless we bring them to our kids in a way, the way if we are teaching our boy to wash utensils, then we got to teach our girl also to open her own bank account.
True.
I don't know whatever it will take, but I think all of us will have to come together and then make this uh, the parity has to be brought in from this grassroots level. That's how it's going to happen, because I'm sorry if I'm taking too much time, but one example I want to give here is that this interesting example I came across is that, look at movies, look at how the women are portrayed in movies. How much time, screen time, not like smiling and dancing, I'm saying this real screen time is she getting, the female protagonist, the female lead,
Yeah.
how much time she's getting versus the male? Is she there just to enhance his character, smile around and dance? And is she talking to some other female on the screen? If yes, what is the conversation about? Is she talking about love and boys only? Is she having a meaningful conversation? And this is, by the way, called Bechdel test or Moore movie test. The problem with us in the society is right now it's a norm. We are okay with women being portrayed like that. We don't question it. We're not that aware. The minute the society becomes aware, we start questioning. Hey, that's not women are all about, right? That's not the norm. That got to be abrasion. Unless that happens, this gender parity and everything, no matter how many discussion are we going to have, it's going to be a very
Yeah.
uphill task, what I believe.
Thank you. Thanks, Bhavna. That's quite a thought-provoking conversation. But Sunena, your views and Anubhati is chasing us. We need to quickly
No,
close
I
this
think
session. But yeah,
most everybody has mostly said something, but I quite relate to Bhavna and the place where I work. It's the from the founders downward, everybody has this philosophy that financial literacy, and especially for women, is equally very important. So I think to your original question, what advice would I give to my team members? I don't have a daughter, but my nieces and all, is that one that I already said: let go of the guilt. You don't need to be a martyr. Second, be relevant.
right.
So whether it is upskilling yourself, whether it is reading up, be relevant, make time for yourself. And third, I think it's important to take your decisions of your life yourself. That doesn't mean that you need to alienate everybody in your life. You will, of course, like you go for advice to a lot of people, you can go to advice, go for an advice to people who are experts in these matters, but don't be in a situation where you don't know who's filing your taxes, or what's your salary structure looks like, or what should be a good term insurance plan for you, or what should be a good school for your children. So I think, add to what Gayatri said, I don't think whether this is measurable, but women generally have better intuitive skills. So you can actually do a good combination of your intuitive skills, your gut, with learnings that you've taken in your office, at your home, and be more, take more ownership of your decision. And that over a period of time builds leadership. And that's when people around you would see the leadership quality, leadership quotient in you as well.
Sure. That's great. Before we wrap up, Amandeep, your views?
So I want to say that women need to have their voice definitely, and they need to take risk. Definitely. If they don't take risk, if they will not rise. So I give my personal example. At every step in my career, I've taken a risk while moving from Ludhiana to Chandigarh, Chandigarh to Delhi, from agency to Copcom, and then specifically this job, I've taken a risk, and I always had a voice. So inside you, you always know where are you lacking, and what are your needs to go to a next level in the leadership position. So, for example, I always knew that where are my learning needs. So I always went up to my employer and said, "Hey, I want to do this course." I did my mutual fund 5-way, CFP coaching, digital marketing course, all sponsored by my employer. One fine day, I went to my CEO. I said, "I'm doing good in communications. I want to learn product side too." So he gave me a product task working with engineers and tech team. So you need to have a voice if you want to. You need to continuously upskill yourself. Take a risk. It's okay. It's a new work. You will learn. You will do mistakes. That's okay. You will learn with your mistakes. So that's what I've done. That.
So basically, upskilling, learning, being relevant, confidence. Smita, you mentioned about speaking up. So I think if you want to add anything here, but if anything to speak on this piece, because you mentioned about speaking up to your colleagues, taking initiatives, and not being worried about what is the other person saying. So
Yeah. No, I think I've said what I had to, Sarika, but I would like to share this experience. So I had a mentor in one of the organization, male mentor, a lot of respect. He's still, you know, kind of figures out whether I'm doing fine, whether what in terms of career, and am I taking the right steps in life. So he had I used to work on his business. He is the managing director of one of the businesses, and I used to work on that business. And I remember I was not very happy with the with the pay hike and the and the basically the assessment of my work, because I also happened to be on some health issue and I wasn't there at work for some time. So while I was working from home, bedridden, but still working from home, not a day's leave. But so he was more than me. I think he was very upset. And he turned around and he told me that day, and it stays with me even till date. He told me that, Smita, if you don't ask for it, you will not get it. So you ask for it. So I think that's what even Amandeep was trying to say. He said, you will
right.
ask for it. And I did that. And guess what? I got it. I think I was around 6 months pregnant, and I went and asked for what was due. And I got it. I got a promotion at 8 months of pregnancy, 1 month before going into my maternity leave.
Wow,
So I
that's
think if
amazing.
you, because see, it's not even the, I don't see it as, I will not put it on the organization. There are thousands of thousands of employees there. Okay. If you have a team of like 50, 60 people, you have to you've got to get yourself heard. No one's going to take that responsibility for you. So I don't put it on anyone else, but the guys, they ask for it. And that's really something to learn from. We don't ask for it. So just ask for what you deserve, and ask. I just feel even if you don't deserve, you feel that you deserve it, then just ask for it and you'll get it.
It's like what someone mentioned about being confident, how men do that easily than women. Anyways, I think we had a great session. Thank you very much. Sunana, you wanted to share something. Maybe we can chat later if you want. But
I just add the last point to what Smita said, and this is what Sheryl Sandberg said. She said that when she was working at
right.
Google, she used to park and walk a long distance, and she was 8 months pregnant. And finally, when she asked the Google founders, "Why can't I, get pregnant women get parking closer to the office?" So they just looked at her and said, "Nobody ever asked."
Right.
So if you
Interesting.
don't ask,
Ask
you're
for
not
it
going to get
is the takeaway, everybody. And over to you, Anubhuti. Thank you very much. Very interesting conversation. I'm very happy to connect with all of you. Anubhuti,
it.
all yours.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
great day.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you,
Sarika.
everyone.
Some
Thank you
some
so
brilliant
much for being
takeaways
patient.
there. Some brilliant takeaways there for everyone listening in, for men and women alike, indeed. So thank you, Amandeep, Bhavna, Gayatri, Smita, and Sanena. We'll move on to the third panel for the day. The third panel discussion for today is around a topic that has been much spoken about in recent times, but there is always more to understand: mental health and wellness. What can be done to bridge the gaps? Joining the discussion today are Kasturi Paladi, Public Relations and Corporate Communications Lead at Xiaomi India; Michelle D'Souza, Director for Communications and Public Affairs at Johnson & Johnson India; Nivedita Moirangthem, Country Communications Manager at IKEA India; and Sravani Sen, Communications Lead at Scriptbox. Moderating this panel is Preeti Setia, Technology Practice Head at Factors PR. Preeti, over to you now to take this ahead. Please give us a minute, everyone, while we just wait for our panelists and the moderator to join in. Over to you now, Preeti, to take this discussion forward. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Anubhuti. Thank you, everyone. I want to first welcome all our dear panelists for joining us today, taking our time and making it happen. And also on behalf of panelists, I want to thank everyone who's joined us today, the organizers of India Impact Communication Conclave and Reputation Today, for bringing a panel which has been the most sought after topic in last 2 years, if not got its emphasis and significance since last five. It's all existing, but I think in last 2 years we've realized the importance of the most talked after subject called mental health and wellness. We have with us panelists who've been through walks of our life, young budding managers who've been working with workforce, those who understands that when it comes to dealing with stress, it's never synonymous to a poor mental health. And mental health is more to do with many other things and aspects. So in today's panel discussion, I think we would want to evolve, understand the meaning of true mental health in individual lives, and also how when we work in workplaces and organizations, working with teams, and how as a social entity can we inculcate the real meaning of mental health. I'll go in the order, and maybe my first question to Michelle here. Michelle, if we can understand from you, what is the definition that you're hearing about mental health and wellness, and what could be some of the roadblocks in today's understanding for this? If you could unmute Michelle yourself, it would be right.
Okay, thank you so much, Preeti, and and also for to promise, because I think this is a conversation that keeps needing to be had. Uh, COVID-19 has not created a new mental health crisis. It has pretty much always been here. What the pandemic has done is really exacerbate the issue and has brought out an issue that has been in the shadows for a long time. I think as comms professionals, PR professionals, we more than a lot of others have always been on the sidelines of crisis. We work to very tight deadlines, and at some point or the other, this kind of impacts us. But we cannot. Um, Sorry, I thought there's a bit of a disturbance. Can you hear me, Preeti?
Yes, Michelle, you're audible.
And I think we have our own tips and tricks to kind of deal with this. But this pandemic has really stretched everyone, including us, to the limit. We simply don't. Organizations don't have a playbook to deal with these challenges. I think one of the things that we have learned is talk about it, bring it out of the shadows. The more we normalize conversations on mental health, the less stigmatized it becomes, the less difficult it is for an employee to have a conversation with his manager or with the peers. So I think there is a big role that all of us play in making sure that within the organization and even without, we we ensure that we make we recognize that some people are more fragile than others. We sensitize the organization and the environment to ensure that we support people, including ourselves. And the third is we create this culture of connections, and we create a culture of empathy, a culture of resilience that helps people along the way. I don't think there's too much more to it than that, and there is a role that organizations play that's really very front and center, because that's where people spend their the majority of their life. So I think you're on mute, Preeti.
Okay, sorry. Taking the conversation, Nivedita, if you could unmute yourself as well. The conversation of we always relating to happy places that we work. What does mental health and wellness do to us in an organization? Is it actually the positive emotion that binds us all together? And from a symptoms perspective, or what could go wrong for a mental health for an employee?
First of all, thank you for having me here. I think organizations, have a big role to play when it comes to, the softer part of how to, create more awareness, and how to, sensitize, people who work there, because oftentimes we see that it's not spoken about, and people are either afraid, or they feel not so okay to come up and speak up about it. But of course, I mean, at the end of the day, it will impact productivity, but it will also impact the way the employees feel, and how they also take back these feelings to their homes and their families, right? So it's a long term impact, I would say. and it could be quite intense in some sense if you're not able to speak up. So organizations will play a big role in enabling an environment where they feel safe and comfortable in coming up and talking about it, because that's the only way to get out of it, right? While talking about it, it's not just one, it needs a multi-pronged approach, right? It's not one way or the other. It's not just one or two approaches, but it is the responsibility of everybody, not only in the organizations, but also in the society, where you go back, your homes, your families, your relatives, the community where you are interacting with, what is the role? Because it's not just, it's not just where you work or where you live or where you play or where you socialize. It needs a multi-pronged, it needs a multi approach to be able to address this issue. But this is needed, because if we don't do it, then of course it affects the person and also the people who are associated with the person.
Right, definitely. I think seizing it at the right time and understanding and bringing a right awareness is what's needed. And
Yes.
there was this recent study from an HR perspective, and everybody studied Great Resignation to the Great Reshuffling that's happening. The entire pivot for any employee today to identify which is at one employer I want to continue my life with is not only the one who's saying I'm in the right designation and I'm in the right role, but there are three more emerged concepts. Am I being treated for the love and the passion that I bring at work? Am I getting my peace of mind, and am I taken care for my well-being? And the third piece is, am I driven for the purpose? And I think all the last 3 points are very important for us to feel good at oneself. And I think mental health therefore
Yes.
reciprocates to that, and therefore it's nothing to do with illness.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
I'll go.
also just to add on that, what Michelle said, it's become even more pronounced, right? After the last 2 years. I mean, before that, yes, this was one of the, this existed in our lives, but in the last 2 years, it has become even more pronounced. And then, of course, we need to be even more aware of what to do to enable a good environment. Yeah.
Right, right. I'll go to Shrabani, and if you could unmute yourself, Shrabani. Is it to do with that we have taken our personas behind the screens right now? Is it to do with that we have gone so digital that we have started masking our emotions and always doing very cutthroat, very right in the face transaction? Have we become more transactional, and has that added to us
I think yes.
mental stress? Yeah.
I think yes. I think adding to what everyone has spoken about, and we've been talking about, how the organizations are playing a part in our lives and how families playing a part in our lives. But we need to also understand that how we individually are, working towards it. The I in this equation is very important, because the conscious choices that we make also make or break, our own mental wellness or well-being. And the choice of being your real self or being able to express yourself clearly is very important, because at this point in time we are at an age where unless and until you express how you feel, nobody will be able to grasp the kind of space you're in or the kind of problems that you're facing on a regular level. So that I plays a very important and a very significant role in our lives. And I think every individual has that right to be able to speak for themselves, because if they are putting in that kind of effort to their organizations, to the firms, they also have the right to get that kind of appreciation and encouragement from the organization to take care of themselves on a regular basis as well. So I really feel that that's very important, and that should not be neglected at all.
Right, right. And I think the composition around you is changing. And in last 2 years, because of the hybrid model where you didn't get the chance to meet people, you've not been able to show empathy. You've been able to talk empathy, but you've not been able to express empathy. Do you think that has become a big challenge?
I think yes, because before this whole pandemic, when you were done with work, 6:30, you are done with your work, you're going home, you draw a line there. That's my work time, and now is my me time. What has happened now with this post-pandemic situation, this hybrid work culture, is those lines have become blurred. And now we don't understand where we need to draw that line to be able to give time for ourselves and give time to work and distinguish between these two lives that we are leading. because these conscious choices are what make your life a stable one, bring a balance in your life, and allow you to bring that kind of mental wellness that you're looking for. I mean, you can find that in different things that you do, even in taking a small hobby on a regular basis, like maybe gardening or reading a book or going for a walk or just taking 10 minutes to yourself in your balcony and just breathing in and breathing out to understand and reflect on what you have done throughout your day, to live those little achievements on a daily basis. That's very important, but we've not been able to process that fully, and that's something that we need to do, and we need to consciously have a conversation about it, like Michelle pointed out. So that's definitely something that we should look forward to doing.
All right. I may request Kasturi to unmute herself. And all that we have heard from Michelle, Nivedita, and Sribani, we need to be well aware. We need to have the right conscious. We need to seize and look at what's causing us the mental issues, and how do we make sure that we're stepping up to get the better self of ourselves, the happy one, the happy me. There is also the other side of the mirror, which is the toxicity. What are the triggers today? So if you could unmute yourself, Kasturi, we could hear from you. What are the challenges and what are the origins and triggers for toxicity at work culture?
First of all, Preeti, I would like to thank you for inviting me for the panel. I think it's a very, very relevant conversation to have, especially Women's Day special and mental health. I can't reiterate enough that this conversation needs to grow louder and much needs to spread much wider. So I would also like to thank everyone else who's sharing their thoughts, because mental health happens to be a very difficult conversation to have anyway, because there are a lot of grays, right? And there are a lot of areas that you don't know what is probably going to come and impact you, and what's going to have that impact on you, where the point that you mentioned about toxicity is extremely important, because like Shravani mentioned, I call her Bonnie, by the way, but like Shravani mentioned, we have been distant and we have not been working together in a very, very long time. So what happens inevitably is that intentions are not very clear. These thoughtless actions which make you feel ignored, which make you feel that you're not respected enough, which make you feel that you're not given your due credit, get amplified even more when people are working in a remote or a hybrid structure currently, because you're not in office, you can't really see someone's intentions through and through. So that's number one, I think. What does a toxic work culture impact your mental health? 100% yes. Why not? Because if you're invested in your work, if you're personally so driven towards achieving the organizational goals or your personal goals through what you're trying to do, and if you feel that you're not given your due credit, if you feel that you're not given the due amount of respect that you get for the work, a lot of different things can add up to it, right? So toxicity in workplace can definitely impact your performance, can impact your mental health, and all of that is obviously intrinsically connected, because you're at the center of it, all of it. And what can you do about it, if that's something that you asked? It's very simple. I think it starts with accepting that you are getting impacted. I think you need to first understand that it's impacting you. You need to understand and come to an acceptance that, this matters to me. My personal and professional life, as much as I would want to differentiate it, is not really separate. I'm personally invested in my work. Profession is what sometimes probably defines certain people as well, for some people. And inevitably, there is a connection that cannot be denied, right? So it starts with acceptance that, yes, a toxic workplace is impacting me. That's where you can probably, I'm not a mental health expert, so I can't really say about the action plan, but that's where I think the movement in terms of what you can do next can even come into an existence, right? There is enough and more help that's available. And I think I was reading a couple of tweets that were being made very recently, because there's a helpline that has been launched for mental health awareness, right? And people can use that helpline to reach out to experts and seek help, etc. But for me, does toxic work culture impact you and mental health? 100%. And are there ways of figuring it out? 100%. But it starts with you first acknowledging that it does.
Right. So I think from acknowledging to even declaring your intentions, the most important piece, and if absence of that can create a mental trigger or wellness trigger which may make you lethargic to come to office. You don't want to wake up to attend or see the face of your colleague for that matter. How productive and important could that be? I think that's what we are dealing with, and these are some symptoms. If you see your favorite most productive employee losing mojo, losing energy, I think those could be triggers where we need to seize. I'll go in the house again. If you could unmute Nivedita, do you want to add any point here of any triggers that you see could add to toxicity?
Yes, I think you said it right. When you see a difference in how coworkers and employees are reacting to situations, if there is a sudden change in behavior, or we see that there is he or she is distracted and not responding to how you should to the way that one should, then these are triggers that should mean that we should take note of. And then it also depends on how we are kind of sensitizing managers and leaders to be able to notice these changes, right? And these are all soft aspects, and there cannot be a framework or a guideline to say these are the rules for and these are the guidelines for you to follow in order to notice this, or to be able to figure out that your coworkers are not in a good space. It's also to as managers and leaders, we should also try and stay updated, and figure out ways and means of connecting with our coworkers to be able to spot this on time. That's the only way, I think. If caught on time, of course, like Kasturi said, there is a way out. If not, then it can lead to bad things. So I would say it starts with one, of course, acknowledging it, but it also starts with how we are more empathetic as managers and leaders, how we are able to read between the lines and see what is not said, right? What is not said is often more important than what is said also. So how do we recognize that, and how we notice that is something that we all should stay updated with. Thank you.
Since we are talking of the composition which is rooted with mental, a subconscious mind to a conscious mind absorbs everything around it physically, and through our six senses we probably can only register that much. But there are some subconscious triggers, and social media probably, we may not realize, could be a trigger where we are consuming something which is wrong. I'll go in the house with Shrabani to understand, what are your views? Is social media creating that trigger for us where we are consuming something which is unwanted?
I think social media is, a platform that essentially brings a sense of belonging for everyone. I mean, that is why everyone wants to be a part of it. And right now, the whole concept of monetizing social media has become another trigger why, people from every age group want to be a part of this platform. So we see more and more numbers, coming swarming into different social media channels. And what happens is the number that increases causes a sense of competition and a sense of comparison, which is what draws the negative aspect of social media here. People, look for that validation through social media, and they feel that there are people who are judging them, and if they are able to, sit on their expectations, the people who are judging them, then they are successful in life. This is what the wrong notion of social media can sort of bring into. Now, the point being, it can make or break someone's future and career also. People actually have been encouraged, supported, and they're making careers out of social media today. And that's, become such a point for people to consider that, as a full-time option too. But these very avenues also provide anxiety, depression to multiple people who do not get that kind of support and that kind of encouragement that they are getting from, they're looking at others getting from it, because it's not the same for everyone. And we are at this point in time, I would say, living in an age of a digital age of vulnerability. Social media comes with like a distorted lens on appearance and reality. All these filters on Instagram, on Facebook, all of these have created an expectation that you need to look like a celebrity. You need to be like a particular body type. You need to have those features to be successful and popular. I mean, teenagers who are going through body changes at this point in time, for them, it's going to be such a difficult phase. So all of this plays with your mind in some capacity. So definitely it impacts your mental wellness back and forth at every age level. When you're looking at growing up in school, in work, in office, at this point in time, people are looking to do background checks on social media for your own professional journey also. That's how important social media has become. So we can't really avoid it, but we have to make a conscious choice of what to accept from social media and how much to leave out. And that's something that we need to understand, that content is there for everyone, but how much content would you allow in your life to impact yourself, and what content would you want to choose to leave out? So that's how I think social media has been impacting, but that's how we feel that we can make a choice of what to do and what not to do with social media today.
Sure, sure. Thanks. If you could unmute yourself, Michelle, I would love to hear your views as well, because social media becomes that glorified platform where, if not individuals like you and I and the one that in my neighborhood, definitely celebrities use these platforms to glorify how they have recovering for mental wellness. And I think they've been the ambassadors, so to say, to bring their wellness recovery on this platform. So there is a bright side, but do you think there is a not so bright side of going to the social media?
So I think the way Srabani put it, I don't think I can add anything. She said it beautifully. She covered all of those aspects. So there's nothing more, to add from that perspective. But you asked a specific question about celebrities and, talking about mental health. I think that is positive to a huge extent, because people follow the celebrities. Their voices matter, irrespective of what we want to think. We think about it, is their voices that really highlight a topic. And sometimes, like everyone else, or we also have this little degree of skepticism, right? Why are they doing this? Is there a brand that they are kind of
Right.
is there a
Endorsement.
shadow brand somewhere, right? So we do question that, and maybe that's because we are in this profession and we sometimes realize that this is how things work. But I think overall, the spotlight that celebrities bring to this matter is still incredibly useful. It's incredibly important, as long as people put this in perspective, because there's what also triggers is the sense of entitlement sometimes. My mental well-being is most important, and that means I will come to work and I will work the hours that I want to work to the extent I want to work for. So there are both sides, right? And there are other sides which is like, suck it up and deal with it. So I think
Yeah.
there is this balance that we have to accept. But having said that, there are real mental health, well-being issues, and I keep using this phrase mental well-being instead of mental health, because we tend to think of mental health as this really, somebody having a nervous breakdown, somebody who's going through some really difficult times, who needs therapy. And yet we all impacted, our mental well-being is impacted every single day. If a spouse is angry with you, it affects your well-being, right? Your boss doesn't always necessarily acknowledge something that you've done, it affects you. And we can't pretend it doesn't affect us. So I think what we need to do is be conscious that if this how is impacting us, then what we say, what we do, and what we don't say and what we don't do also impacts the teams that we work with. And what I think the pandemic has done is really spotlight well-being to a much greater extent than in the past. I know that for me, I wasn't always conscious of everything I said, everything I did, and the impact on my teams. But with
Right.
all this constant battering of well-being during the
Yeah.
pandemic, I am far more conscious now. I think it makes me a better person. It makes me more accepting of people. It more accepting of timelines and even the agencies we deal with. I'm far more, I think, relaxed and flexible with some of the things than I used to be 2 years ago. So, so I think it is something we should hang on to, and not let it slip back the moment we all get back into office, because ultimately people. And coming back to both Nivedita and Shavani's point about toxicity, and even Kasturi's about toxicity. Also, toxicity starts with the culture that companies are trying to build. And if the company culture encourages us to be difficult people. People shouldn't be relaxing and laughing and lounging around, and they're too happy, right? They're not really working. We've seen that. We've all had toxic managers, toxic employers, toxic companies, and they know that it doesn't lead to productivity, but still we do it. So I think there is a recognition that culture starts also with management, with all of us, and how can we as comms people also play this role in creating this culture of acceptance and creating a culture where toxicity is not acceptable anymore. It's not a great form of management. People have a lot more options now, and they will ultimately vote with their feet.
Right. We used to always have, an agony aunt kind of a persona within the team member. We used to have our granny, so-called mommy, team player always, because they normally would help you see what's coming next. They would pat on your shoulder and say, "Hey, all is well." So we always get this counseling, and I think the awareness and consciousness of making that change, Michelle, has already happened with the recent announcement. Kasuri also indicated that helpline that Honorable Finance Minister announced. I may want to go in the house with Nivedita. Nivedita, such telecalling, counseling help. Do you think people will reach out now since there is an option for them to keep confidentiality around the topics as well?
I think any kind of effort towards this goal, maybe today it will not reach, the many people, but I do think that this is a good step, and India is one of those countries where we have a wide reach when it comes to the mobile phones, to internet. So I definitely think it's a move in the right direction. Yes.
All right, Kasturi, that was your point as well. Do you want to add something on this one? Making more accessibility for us to reach out to avenues. You may not want to discuss something in your own office, and Michelle said that organization still are struggling on evolving a playbook on how to deal with this. These independent helplines, do you think that will help?
100%. I think any help is good help and should be sought out and should be asked for. I think in our organization as well, we take mental health very, very seriously. And, there are these AI chatbots, etc. A lot of these things that we have introduced so that there is an open platform that is available for employees to talk about mental health, talk about what they're feeling, how they're feeling. There's an assistant called Amber who does a regular check and, sends out an email to see what is really happening, to kind of evaluate what the mental state is. Now, all the responses in such a situation are also like, confidential, but sometimes people in the workplace, especially since we are in communications, we might not be comfortable sharing things with people in the organization, right? Because we are a central function, inevitably work with every team possible, and it's a lot more difficult for us to kind of open up and search for the agony aunt, like you mentioned, Preeti, and talk to an agony aunt. That's not a possibility. So I think especially for the communications industry and the public relations industry, this is a great move. It does, at least if nothing, there is a phone number that you can call, you can pick up the phone on, and you can have a conversation. Someone will probably hear you out, because I think mental health is a lot connected to, like I think Nivedita mentioned, what is not said, but it's also a lot connected to someone hearing you and someone just listening to you. So listening and speaking are two parts which can be bridged with initiatives like this, and it really makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Right, right. I have a request to the organizers. If at all there are some questions from the audience, please place it on the chat line so we can from the panel take. Otherwise, I'll go with the regular flow because I'm really getting a great sense. So if we started this conversation saying in last 2 years, and if we would have done some digital discovery, mental health and wellness would have been the top rated hashtags. But equally, gratitude, empathy, what we are discovering in our conversation is awareness, consciousness, listening, campaign, availability, accessibility, all these are very important topics, and they all are coming in coexistence. I happen to was coached 2 years ago, not in the wake of mental health but well-being, and that's where a positive psychology, and the thumbnail says sharp, keep looking at your strengths, edge, continue to be happy, a absorption level, beyond your absorption, don't multitask, right? R is where the recovery from any trauma, any setback, any bad meeting has to happen. We are in a day to day managing crisis, so recovery has to happen. And P, have a physical strength. Physical strength is more important. You need to be fit to absorb to all of this. So I want to go round in the house. What have been your mantras for positive psychology? I'll start with Shrabani, Kasturi, Michelle, and Nivedita. Shrabani.
I think you have rightly pointed out, that, and as people in the panel have said, people are more vocal about it now. And the more you speak about it, the more people know about it, and the more it's accepted in society and within circles. And the last 2 years have been, proof of that. The whole conversation about the great attrition, where people are willing to move on if they're not happy where they are, goes to show that people are taking this very, very seriously. If they are not feeling encouraged, not feeling motivated, if they are not getting the empathy that they feel, the encouragement that they feel from the organizations, it will not take them a moment like before to decide that no, this is not the right space for me, because at this point in time nothing is more important than my health and my well-being, and they are willing to move. And I think to deal with that, everything that can help you is very important at the moment. When we're talking about listening, I think the best way to go is to resort to your family. I think you will always have a hearing, perspective, someone to hear you out from your family, from your own parents, siblings, whoever you feel can hear you out. You can just have a conversation with them and you can let it out, because everyone goes through tough days. And here we are not getting an outlet, caged up in their houses to go out and maybe do things that could freshen you up, that could relax you, rejuvenate you earlier that we did. We traveled, we hung out with friends, we had a good time. During the pandemic, we didn't have those choices. I think speaking and spending time with your loved ones and doing what makes you happy. I mean, I have seen people using adult coloring books these days. That makes them happy, then do it. I mean, whatever gives you the little bit of joy in the day, even if it's for 10 minutes, watching your favorite show, sitting out and listening to some music. I think every small ounce of activity that can add to your joy in the day can give you that kind of transparency about how you can deal with the next coming day. I think that's very important.
Great. Let's hear from Kasturi. How do you bounce back? How do you keep the mojo in you?
Very simple funda and very simple mantra. Eat right, please eat all your meals. Because, mental health, honestly, it's chemicals in your brain. And chemicals are fueled by there in your system. And you need to ensure that the chemicals in your brain are okay, so that your brain can think, your body can react, and you can relax. So that's number one. I think eating right is supremely important. Second is find a hobby. Like Shravani said, Bonnie said, find a hobby, get something else to do. You have a client chasing you on a call, you have someone else trying to tell you that this coverage is extremely important, this press release needs to go out right now. If we don't do this interaction, our lives will be destroyed. No, you have to have one hobby which gives you that peace of mind, which tells you that you're doing something which is for yourself. Because at the end of the day, everyone, no matter how selfless you are, you have to be at the center of it. It's mental health, right? You have to give yourself priority, and giving yourself priority, that's one thing you can do if you're getting a hobby. And finally, I think you need to slowly and steadily, it doesn't happen immediately, but I sometimes when I'm feeling very very anxious, I just feel like, okay, my body is present here but my soul is stepping away, and I am not a part of this conversation right now. I am thinking about something else, and I'm in my cozy cove where no one can really enter and impact me. So that's how I feel like, okay, I'm going to protect myself from anything that's probably going to be hurting me or impacting me mentally. So sometimes it's important to distance yourself. So three things: eat right, find a hobby, and sometimes just feel that you're out of the situation, you're not really at the center of it. Things become supremely simple when you feel like you're not being targeted. That's it.
Absolutely. Michelle, mantras. If you could unmute yourself, Michelle.
So two things. Continuing from what Kasturi said, in my case, the hobby has translated into getting a pet. So I've adopted a couple of stray cats. I feed them, and I just stop everything at 7 o'clock because I have to feed them, and I will not accept any meetings between that time because they're more important. So that's one that brings me joy. The second is no meeting Fridays. We started it during the height of the pandemic where we avoided meetings on Fridays, but I have just continued it and I've made it a religion now for myself. I will not accept meetings on Fridays unless the building is on fire. So what this does is it gives me, otherwise I would end the weekend, end of Friday with a lot of things to do, and then I would spend one day of my weekend trying to complete that because I like to start Mondays on a fresh, with my to-do list in place, with everything on thing, and it just gets very very difficult when you have so many things that are still pending. So I used to take one day of my weekend doing just organizing myself. Now I've used that on a Friday, and I don't do meetings. I just complete all the things I have, approval of press releases, complete all the documents I have to complete, send off the stuff. So by the end of Friday I'm in a very good space because I'm organized and I know what I have to start Monday with. That's done wonders for my own mental health because I'm not thinking about what have I left out, what have I not sent out, what is sitting in my inbox not replied to. And that Friday gives me the space to do it. So I'm a little difficult with people who it's kind of like we have to do this on Fridays. Not my problem. As I said, building needs to be on fire.
All right, we will wrap this up. One thing, Nivedita, and I think we should be sorted.
Yes, I think some people say Fridays are the new Mondays, but that's really terrible. It's not, and it should not be. But one thing I can say is that, I feel good when people around me are happy. So I think kindness is a great thing to have and to also cultivate and to be conscious about. Everybody is kind, but what do you do in order to make yourselves happy and, people around me happy is very important for me, whether it is in the team, how to create less stress or not show stress or reduce the stress, whether at work or at home. So that is my go-to, I would say, tonic to be nice, to feel good, and to make others around me happy. Yes.
All right, so I think that's where we have the tonic is sprinkling happiness. The tonic is creating harmony, and that's will keep us in the best of our mental wellness. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. We had wonderful conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you to all the panelists, Kasturi, Michelle, Nivedita, and Srabani for sharing these wonderful insights today. And thank you, Preeti, for moderating such a fantastic discussion. Joining us for the next panel on beating the bias, what are the common prejudices and how can they be addressed, are five fine women leaders. Bhavna Imran, communications leader at Cortiva AgriScience. Mansi Tiwari Somvanshi, Head of Corporate Communications at Marico Limited. Megha Chaturvedi, Senior Advisor for Communications and Corporate Relations at Rio Tinto. Mitul Lal, Head of Communications at Josh Talks. And Pooja Trehan, Head of Marketing Communications at Sugarbox Networks. Moderating the panel discussion is our very own Amita Vadera, Knowledge Manager at the Promise Foundation. Amita, over to you. Look forward to having this discussion.
Hi. Hi, am I audible?
Hi, Amita. Yes, we can hear you.
My Hello.
Hi, Amita. We can hear you clearly.
Hello. Am I audible to all of you?
Amita, Mansi here. Yes, I can hear you. I'm not sure whether I am audible to all.
We are able to hear you. We could hear you.
Great.
Amita and Mansi.
Hi, Amita. We are able to hear
I'm not
you.
able to hear.
I think she's not able to hear her, so let's just give her a minute. Let me text her outside of this application. And Just let her know. Maybe you can try with headphones. We've already been doing this for the last 2 years, but technical issues never seem to cease. Now, can you hear us, Amita? Hi, Amita, can you hear us?
Hi.
Can you hear
I'm
us?
sorry. Yes, sorry, something wrong with the machine.
Okay,
Hi.
okay, great. So I'm going backstage now. The discussion is over to all of you.
Yes. Thank you, Anubhuti. A warm welcome to all of you. We are here today to discuss and share our thoughts and views on something that has been existed since ages, uh, has been spoken about at length as well. There have been various actions taken to tackle the issue, but however, it still continues to exist. So today we will talk about beating the bias. What are the common prejudices and how can they be addressed? So people are often biased against others outside of their own social group, showing prejudice, discrimination, stereotyping. And we common say that we should not label others, but we cannot help but do so. We naturally categorize people by their age, occupation, language, income, and many other qualities. So my first question is for all the panelists, and I would like to request all of you to please keep it short and crisp. So let's just kick this off. We are now in 2022, and even today, prejudice, discrimination, and stereotyping still exist at our workplace. So, is it like due to lack of awareness, lack of intent, or it's like something else? So, Bhavna, let's just start with you.
Sure, I can go. Before I start, I'd like to throw three numbers at all of you: 11 million, 40, and 150. You know what? 11 million is the number of pieces of information which is thrown at us at any point in time. And our brain usually processes about 40 at a time. So, in case there's a tiger sitting right in front of us, even before we absorb that information, we would have been its meal. So typically what the brain does is that actually compresses all of this information, and it compresses and actually puts out a reaction which is based on experiences or some other validations, some of the previous learnings. And that's how I guess biases are created. So maybe we are not, we are not even having enough experiences or data in our head which our brain can process. So and hence it ends up either stereotyping or bandwagoning or perception bias. So it's not that it's a lack of intent on our part. I guess we're just hardwired that way. Each of us, I think, as individuals, are hardwired to be biased about certain things. And that hardwiring happens not just with our own individual self, but also in our interactions with people. So if we have to change that, I think we're all well-intended people, right? I mean, we have to change that. I think it has to be a deliberate learning experience, exposing ourselves to more number of people, just being more diverse in groups. It just becomes that much important for us to be understanding what could that be, and ensure that that data set for us is sort of upgraded and kept ready. And hence so that 150, the last number what I told you, that 150 are the typical number of biases which actually are thrown at us. So we have to ensure that that 150 is an updated number and not based on some old forms of thinking. So I just thought that was a very interesting thing which the University of Virginia had done, and I thought it just gives us a very nice view of what we think of as a bias, and not something which is happening. Discrimination is happening not deliberately, but it is. I think it's just physiologically also being triggered.
Yeah, that's a really fresh perspective. Yes.
Yeah.
Megha, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Bhavna that I think it's the conditioning of the society that we are in that kind of makes us behave in a certain way. But there's another number that I would want to throw. I was reading that in 2021, the venture capital funding kind of, surpassed all the last numbers, right? There was great funding that happened. But out of that, only startups that were founded by women only got 2% of that funding, right? So I think there is still that sort of a dissidence about if women can lead, if women can grow businesses, right? So I think it's not just about, and I think it stems from the fact that as a society in India, right, we have been, it starts at home, right? So a lot of things, how you behave at home, how you treat your women, right? I think that's why I think, and there's one more thing that, and I've observed that at my workplace, right? A lot of this, sometimes we witness mansplaining happening, right? Or there are instances where we've been told, hey, this is a critical sector, maybe women are more okay for B2C and not very B2B sort of an incline. So I think it's sort of a conditioning that's been kind of given to us, but I think it's I think high time that it should change. Yeah.
Absolutely. It all starts at home. I agree. Pooja, you would want to share?
It's the most hilarious example I'd love to share. Uh, every time, and I'm sure Mansi, you can add to it. Every time there are women walking into the room with short hair, the conversation somewhere or the other ends. Do you want to try growing your hair longer? And I'm like, wow, that's such a personal choice. But that, and no way am I judging or insulting the people or not giving respect to the people around me, or but that's the most basic stereotyping that people often begin with, and it's just a style that we want to support or enjoy doing it, and that's the first thing that ever comes up. But what I like that Bhavna and Megha actually put forth is that we all acknowledge that there is this kind of discrimination, stereotyping that happens. We acknowledge and we are aware of it, but do we acknowledge and work towards the change? I think if it starts in our head, we are the ones who need to go out and say that, yeah, I mean, that was something else, but every piece of life with us needs to have a different perspective. So I'm going to leave everybody with a, I mean, not leave rather, but in this whole first response in a piece saying that, can we start a new conspiracy theory where I literally tell people who are stereotyping us, let's get into a code of curiosity. What's the question? What's happening with you all? Why do you want to even bucket us into certain segments? I mean, we have 6 beautiful, awesome women on a panel. We're talking about it. And I want to then go back to the men and say that join us, come on these panels and be our advocates and say that there is some change that we need in life. I mean, all of us are aware of all of this. We've acknowledged the concerns, issues, need gaps. Now let's work towards it together. I think that's my piece on it to start with.
Right. Interesting piece. Mitul, you want to share?
Yes, firstly, thank you so much for having me, and super excited to be a part of an all-women panel today. It's 2022 and this shouldn't be a big deal, but unfortunately it is even today. And yeah, coming to your question, I think, Amita, I think, gender stereotypes are reinforced by conscious and unconscious biases. I think we all know that today. The fact of the matter is that the system that we are sort of functioning in today is built by men in a way that it benefits men more than women. And I think it's high time that we need to change that and really reimagine the way our workplaces are structured, our organizations are structured, and looking forward to delving deeper into this discussion today.
Right. Mansi, your thoughts?
Thanks. Thank you, Amita. Thank you for putting together this panel, and thank you for having me here. And let me now start with what Pooja said. So I agree, Pooja, and believe me, in my home, we are breaking this stereotype completely. I have a 7-year-old boy who has long hair and is many a times been mistaken for a girl, and me with short hair. So we are there, we are breaking that stereotype any which way. But so I agree with what all the other panelists have been talking about, that unconscious bias is there, and which is leading to all the discrimination, prejudices that we still come across in our workplaces. And I'll again go back to a personal example. This my 7-year-old son is a super football enthusiast. Now, a few years back, he was being a typical 4-year-old, cribbing that he doesn't have friends who can play football with him. And I suggested that a friend who happens to be a girl, he suggested, why don't you call her over and check if she wants to play with you? And his reaction honestly took me aback. His reaction was, but mama, girls don't play football. And I was honestly surprised because, That's not the kind of atmosphere that we have exposed him to. We've been very, very conscious about inculcating, about building a very gender neutral, with no stereotype household. So where did this come from? This is again social conditioning, because he has seen in his friend circle most of the boys playing a particular type of sport. So he is again categorizing that. He started at this tender age, at the age of 4, he started categorizing people basis their gender. So of course we got into corrective mode. We spoke to him a lot about, how there are such famous women sport personalities. We spoke to him about, various other leaders, women leaders in various functions, various spaces. So, if you apply the same thing to the organization today, now you see that unconscious bias is being addressed by, I believe, each and every organization in today's day and age. So, identifying that there's an unconscious bias is, I think, a given now. But what next? I think that what next is the question that we have to address. Of course, so you have identified the bias. You have made and enabled your leaders, your employees to acknowledge that there is a bias that exists. But how is it that you can ensure that you give them relevant information? You give them relevant kind of exposure, I believe, that challenges those stereotypes, and build a inclusive, diverse workforce. I think that what next and how can we change this thing now is the key question.
Right, right. Thank you, all of you, for your inputs. So, moving on, I would like to ask Pooja a question. Nowadays organizations have experienced teams, ethics committees, and more to handle such issues. How can we ensure that such committees add value and there is no fear of hostility to approach while approaching them?
Thank you for actually addressing that question to me, because I'm very passionate about it, and possibly my organization saw that. I've been made like the chairperson for POSH committee, and my first learning over there was, why are women reluctant to even come up and talk about a concern? Fine, they don't want to file a complaint, they're really worried. And what was the biggest problem that I saw? It was women who wanted to bring the problems, probably discuss about it, but they were told back at home that, listen, you're getting an opportunity to get out of home, build a career. Don't get into any environment or situation that gets murkier for you. I mean, why would you not allow someone to stand up for their rights? So there are organizations working towards it. The only piece that can help over here is people who are either on the committee or your immediate leaders. Make it very inclusive for you. No more can you live in a culture which says it's top down. Nothing exists top down. It's vertical, it's horizontal, it's your colleagues, everybody needs to take that ownership. Employees often go through this big problem of moral injury, literally, like, can we say this, can we talk about this, can we do that? So the committees exist, and the employees should take an opportunity to go there, male or female, does not really matter. Conversation needs to be two-way. That's the only piece. And if anybody is approaching, we need to ensure that we don't tell them that, listen, you're going to be facing dire consequences, and so will the person that you're complaining about. Let it be more on a balanced view. You get your eggs in one basket. Understand what's the problem, how can we solve your issue. We'll see how the other person or the offender needs to be dealt with. I think if this approach is applied largely for any other problems, then these committees become more integral to everybody and everybody.
Right. I think. Thank you for such interesting insight. Thank you. Mansi, my next question is for you. We hear a lot about gender-based pay difference. So why does this happen and how can we avoid it?
So, Amita, I think this is one of the most talked about and I would say a concerning area when we look at any India specific statistics. I was going through the Global Gender Gap Report 2020 from the World Economic Forum, which says that India has ranked 112th out of the 153 countries. Now, see, understand, we already have fewer women representation in the workforces due to various societal, psychological, patriarchal roadblocks. And these roadblocks still exist for women like us who have, managed to break this bias and enter the workplaces. So when the journey for two genders, if you look at the two genders and if you compare their journey, the journey is so different. So to say that the result or the outcome is going to be the same for both is being a little unrealistic. There are, and I agree, there are various factors that affect the pay parity. It's the quality of education, it's social dynamics, it's the culture that you get at a workplace, uh, experience or not that you have, which, and we have cases of women dropping out of workplaces at various life stages. So all these widen the pay gap between the genders. Another factor which I think is extremely, extremely critical, and we as women and we as women leaders can actually address this. This is our own belief in ourselves. Though we are seeing a lot of changes, of course, happening in the senior leadership in various organizations, but we need to be much more aware of our own abilities. There are multiple studies which have shown that the pay gap is actually further accentuated by the ask gap. Women tend to hold back when they are negotiating. They tend to not ask for the kind of raise that they would want to. And so I was, while reading up, I came across some very interesting facts. Last year, 73% of women did not ask for a pay raise against a 58% men. So that talks a lot about women themselves taking that initiative. And of course, then there is a whole lot that the organizations can do, right? Um, you can be more transparent about your pay structure. If I, as a woman, am not aware of what my male counterpart is earning, how can I expect to even ask for the right kind of salary? So is it possible to make the wide range of the pay known for all roles, for all levels? Another thing which I think the pay gap gets addressed very easily is if the organization start following a roll forward compensation strategy. So you essentially, your last drawn salary has got nothing to do with what you get paid. It is what you are going to deliver for the organization which defines what your compensation should be. So if I am mandated to lead, say hypothetically, sales for East region, then I am doing an equally important job as a male counterpart delivering it for the West. So there is no role for you to say that, if you are hiring me for delivering on a particular role, the salary has got to be the same. So I believe these are the few things that the organizations can do. And of course, lastly, not enough can be said. Ensure that you invest in women leadership, because various studies have shown the more the women representation in the boards or senior leadership, the smaller is the pay gap.
Absolutely. I think it made a lot of clarity to most of us. Thank you. Bhavna, my next question is for you. Off late, we see some religious prejudice too. As an employer or team leader, what steps one can take to keep them at bay?
Yeah. So, Amita, off late, no. I think religious prejudices always existed, but I would say it has gone in a very interesting way. The journey of a corporate world and how the prejudices have come to play. I think they were long gone are the explicit in the face prejudices about religion, right? I mean, so you don't gasp at looking at some name or something like that anymore. That's not the prejudice which you see. But I think the prejudices are very minor. In it's almost like, if you don't notice it, it could just go. I'll just give you an example. One of my friends, he just got a new office when he took over as the VP, and he works in a media company. Typical creative guy. He wanted to do something with his beautiful office which he had. So, and he is a big fan of poetry, Urdu poetry. So he actually pulled out some interesting Urdu verses and had it up on his walls in the office. And immediately next day, the HR walked up and said, "Oh, you cannot have religious scriptures on the wall." And this is a multinational company. And this is a guy who's worked in for about 20 years. When he told me this, I'm like, is this even possible that, the HR is walking up and asking, they're not even asking what is that script standing for? The guy said it is harmless poetry talking about motivation in life. If you don't even know, but then look at the stereotype: Urdu, religion, it is no. So that, I think that example for me just brought forward the fact that while we all want to and feel that we are very well educated, well open, and a lot more I think aware of what is happening in this world, somewhere back of our mind we are still that some thoughts are just not going away, and that comes forward, I think, in practices like this. Just one more example: when I was with Vodafone in the Middle East, spent some time there, and when I walked in, I was told that the customer base is of course divided into high net worth and category and all of that, but also they, every time they wrote described the customer base, they actually put saying that most of the customers in this belong to this religion. I was like, why are we categorizing that way? Then the customer insights manager came forward and gave me a very interesting thing. He said, if I do it that way, when you as a marketing or a comms person are developing creatives, you're going to be sensitive about some of these things. So a Ramadan campaign is not a blanket campaign for everybody. So but that's a very interesting take on how a religious example could be, used in a positive manner. So I think it's about us understanding what these are, playing it up in the right manner, and not just sort of putting our foot down because, oh, we want to be an inclusive company, so let's not do anything. I mean, white is not, it's not necessary for us to whitewash all our thoughts and, just make them look very inclusive just because we have to be inclusive, right? I mean, you have to add that little bit of color where it is needed, but that color has to be very thought through, and that palette has to be, it has to form a synchrony or a harmony of colors. I think that's what is important. Uh, I have seen in my own organization here and in the previous organizations I've worked, a lot of times we do use, classroom trainings, on-the-job trainings to talk about unconscious biases. We somehow are thinking a little low about talking about explicit biases now. We think that, oh, religion and all that is a no, everybody knows about it. But I think bring that back into the modules. Bring that back into the modules with the current context. As an employer or as a manager, I would say that, bring some of these in the context of your current work environment and talk about it. And that possibly will help us break through some of these prejudices. Yeah?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that was a very fresh perspective you've brought into today's discussion. My next question is to Megha. So, evidence also suggests that discrimination affects the mental health of an employee too. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's a very interesting question, and if psychologically also you consider there are two responses that are told to us, right? It's either a flight or a fight sort of a response, right? And I have seen, and even in my conversations with a lot of women colleagues or even friends, right? Most of us kind of tilt towards flight, right? We either escape the situation, we escape the conversation, difficult conversation, we escape the organization, we change teams, right? And one example that comes to my mind is a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine. She has a young son of 3-year-old, and she was telling me, Megha, when I was about, like, when she was pregnant, she was in her first trimester, her appraisal season was around the corner, right? And she said, till the time my letter wasn't in my hand, I did not reveal to anybody that, hey, I'm going through this journey, right? Because there were strong chances that her promotion could have been held, right, for that year. And I think these are certain things which are actually around all of us, but we kind of, we take it as a hard reality and we say, okay, aisa hi hota hai, we will kind of go with it, right? So I think the thing that Bhavna also said is, we really need to fight. And with fight, what I mean to is voice out what's happening, right? At least discuss with your immediate peers and share your experience, so that, sometimes we feel I'm the only person who's probably going through this, right? It can be discrimination of any, sorts. It can be some probably male colleague kind of passing a remark that probably you wouldn't have liked, right? And we kind of, we kind of keep it to ourselves. But the idea is really have those discussions and be very candid about them, because this is not a disease, I mean, the idea is to kind of really voice out what you're experiencing, right? And it's not just to your manager, or it can be to your person who's sitting right next to you. And I think I have been very lucky that I have had male bosses who have could have walked up to and say, hey, this is something that I've experienced, I'm bringing this to your notice, and they kind of understood, right? So I think rather than just going to flight, we should kind of look at the fight thing. And numbers also suggest that, almost 2.5% of the people, 2.5 times a woman. So if a woman is subjected to some sort of discrimination, she is more likely to go into anxiety or depression, right? And then that anger is actually then inward drawn, and we kind of have that whole accountability mechanism goes haywire in that sense, right? So we really need to have conversation free flowing, and I'm glad this panel is actually doing that. So yeah,
So relevant in today's time. My next question is to Mitul. Why are there such few women in leadership positions across industry, like even today? And do you think they struggle in such roles, or it's like yet another stereotype?
Okay, so Amrita, I think I will answer the second part of your question first. I think women not being capable leaders is definitely an unfortunate stereotype that has been passed on for generations now. I think Mansi mentioned this, touched upon this briefly. In positions of leadership, women tend to outperform men, especially during a crisis. If companies with more women tend to even fare better. And these are not just claims. There are multiple sort of studies that have been done. It's been researched, documented, and the evidence for this is only growing, right? But yeah, despite I think all this data and evidence that we have today, women do have lower representation, not just in the workforce, but also in positions of leadership. And it's not true just for India, but all over the world. And I think to understand like why something like this is happening, we need to also reflect on the experience that the experience in a workplace that men and women go through, and the experience is very different. So when men enter an organization, they have other male role models to look up to and to emulate, and they feel comfortable getting to know these male mentors, and they can see themselves filling into their shoes. They also feel what adds to their confidence probably is that knowing that their unique skill sets or their talents will be sort of considered, and they will figure out a way to contribute to the organization in some manner or the other. And I think for women it is very different, right from the point of entry into an organization to actually making it to the top of an organization. There are multiple barriers that we go through, and I think that is how it ends up translating into seeing such few women in positions of leadership that we have today. And I feel like till the time, organizations, individuals don't really address it, and till the time we don't talk about changing, or rather, I'd say rebuilding this culture, I think the, organizational structure will not change. And I think till the time we don't accept women, not just not just at the top level, but really at every level of decision making, and as someone else also pointed out, I think earlier, that when we have more women in decisions of power, that's also when we have more women in the workforce in that particular organization. So I think till the time we don't become more inclusive and diverse as a central philosophy, I think unfortunately the landscape is not going to change too much.
Right.
Amita, if I'm allowed to jump in and share one small, adding to what Mitul just said, very, very interesting. There was a recent article, if I'm not mistaken, one of the business publications, as recent as Feb 22nd, where our union finance minister, Ms. Nirmala herself, actually went out and said that, even though there's a mandate to have one independent woman director on board for companies, they find it really tough for women to come on board for that. Now, there have been enough and more debates, if you pull that article up on social media, where women are actually saying that, listen, this is just a statistic. There are a lot of other responsibilities, and it's a give and take relationship. So you need to understand what are the hardships that is, actually holding women back to do that. and some actually gave interesting perspectives. That means there is an opportunity available. We need to just jump and grab it. So it's an interesting article. We should all just, just have a look if you haven't. So I just wanted to add to that piece. Thanks
I
for
don't know
allowing
how
me to
we're
add
doing.
it.
I don't know how we're doing on time, but I just want to add to what Pooja just said.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
personal example. I've been having conversations about taking up some independent director roles, and every time I speak to some mentors or some people in the industry, people who come to me say, "You're from communications, so double bias. Huh? You're from communications, and you are a woman. So what kind of industries do you want to?" I mean, I have to talk and give them explicitly what I can offer to the table. Would you have asked the same question if I didn't carry these two things? Maybe not. But then for me to do that, and the first 6 months, it only took me that effort to go and market myself. And because I'm a comms person, because I understand the importance of doing that, I was at it. But imagine if there was an engineer and if she was trying to get to an independent director role, she would have given up long back because she wouldn't even understand as to why are we hard selling oneself. So I think that is the prejudice at work, right?
Right. So relating to this only, what are your thoughts on positive stereotypes? Are they helpful? Like, I mean, a smart Asian man or a strong black woman, are these really helpful? I wanted to, anybody of you can
I
pick it
think,
up.
yeah, I think because I have a sort of very resounding no to this, the answer to this is no for me at least. And I think stereotypes of any kind, right, Amita, like whether they're negative or positive, as soon as you start bucketing people into categories that you think, this is what they should be doing, it just limits everyone. So while you've taken examples of, say, a smart Asian man or a woman, right? Indians considered techies or whatever. I think another example that we often hear is that women are more maternal, right? And women are naturally more maternal. And I think the problem over here is with stereotypes, what tends to happen is we oversimplify. So when you say that women are naturally more maternal, it doesn't just mean that. It also, people assume that a woman being maternal means that she's less ambitious, she's less driven, she's not as competitive. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. So yeah, I really don't think stereotypes, whether negative or positive, should be promoted in any way. And I think it's high time that we start sort of, bucketing people into such small boxes. Yeah.
Absolutely agree. In fact, I feel the minute you add an adjective before a stereotype, you're just making the other person feel that, listen, I'm bucketing you, but I'm making you feel nice and I'm being polite about this whole insult. So bear with me. So I agree. I mean, if your maternal instinct is there, so completely you will become the more demure human being. And if the same woman goes out in the organization and is aggressive about proving her point, like how you said, Bhavna, going out there and selling yourself, because I need to tell you if you don't understand what my talent is. Suddenly that woman becomes like, oh, she's wearing the pants in office, she's pretty aggressive, my god, there's no there's no control. So there is nothing called as positive stereotypes. It just makes us feel more calmer for that minute.
There's this adjective that's often used said, oh, she's such an alpha woman, right? What does that mean, right? Alpha woman, if I'm going to voice out what I am, if I'm, opinionated person, you're such an alpha woman. Why don't we say you're such an alpha man, right? I mean, that term in itself kind of, I squirm under
Oxymoronic.
my skin. It's such a bad thing. I mean, yeah, so stereotyping is a total no-no.
Sorry, I have to bring this joke forward. I was watching one of the web series, says How to Get Away with Murder, and the protagonist is a black woman law. So I'm like, okay, lawyer, black, women, and then she's positioned as that alpha. So they have taken all the typical nose, and made it into this one. But then that itself didn't sound right, because then I was expecting a black woman there, because they want to stand out in the show, right? So they did everything which is not a typical stereotype and made that into. So that is, I think, an example of positive stereotype, of whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, boxing it to unbox it to box it, So it's like it's a complicated thing, but I guess that's what the world is heading out to. We are overthinking this a little bit. We have to simplify it and leave that simplified in our heads. We should not. The need for us to put it into a certain category will make us do certain things. I mean, keep it open. I mean, let's not put it into any specific category, right?
I think with millennials and post millennials entering the workplaces, there is no room for stereotyping, be it positive or negative. They are extremely intolerant of any sort of, discrimination, inequality. So, the entire concept of stereotyping, be it in, positive or negative connotation, just doesn't work for corporates anymore.
Right, right. So we have heard such great responses from each of you for this absolutely critical problem of our time. So I think to wrap up, I would like to understand some resolutions as well. So I'm opening up this question to everyone. Any one of you can pick it up. How can an employer tackle discrimination? So, how can proactiveness can be shown to your team? So, any one of you, Pooja, you would want to take it up?
See, the most basic response to that question would be to create an inclusive environment, which or everybody can jump on me and say that, listen, stop giving textbook responses. But in all honesty, it's just all of us being open to collaborating. Let's create an environment where we tell everybody, y'all are not sheroes, heroes, superheroes, supermen, nothing. Y'all are basic human beings living on this planet. Thanks to a lot of other satellite companies, you'll be soon going elsewhere. And you have other planets to travel to. So let's just be humans on these planets, keep life simple, collaborate as much as you can. An inclusive environment actually makes employees feel more engaged and happier to work with. So, day one, you have a new employee joining, make them feel special. I understand buddy programs and all of that organizations do. But the first 30 days itself make that employee feel that they're here for growth. That itself opens up a lot of conversations. So, yeah, that will be my solution to the piece.
Yeah. So for me, I think leading by example is important. The organization should lead by example, and we as individuals also should lead by example, right? We are a little shy to put our best practices forward. If you see a best practice, call it out, talk about it. It's as important as calling out a negative practice, right? So we have to be a little bit more open and kind to ourselves and say that, oh, this is a best practice. Let me share it with people. We have done this, what we call it, the safety pause during COVID. And we started speaking about what we did to keep our families or our environment safe. So in that way, why can't we do a pause, or we can do something where we share some of these best practices, some platforms. It sounds very, is it going to happen? But I think as we do it, it's just people want to then start showing off their good things they've done. And it just becomes a part of your ethos. And just thinking that that is something which we should do. And I, as a person, have been doing that with my family, just call out a best practice.
Right. Yes.
So I think I can't agree more with what Pooja and Bhavna said. It's not just about creating that inclusive workplace. It's not just about creating policies, but it's a lot about leaders actually walking the talk, individuals walking the talk. It's none of the policies can work for you until and unless you implement it the way it is meant to be implemented. So I think that is what we as individuals, as organizations, need to do, to realize that just lip service is not enough. You have to roll up your sleeves and get to it, and practice it day in and day out.
Right. Absolutely. Megha, yeah.
I think I kind of really agree with what everybody has said. Just one point is, in my last organization, after the millennial board was formed, I think the conversations around discrimination came to fore much more, right? So I think the whole Gen Z aspect, they're very comfortable about speaking out, and they're not hesitant, they're not shoving it under the carpet, right? So I think involving everybody in decision making, and I think will solve the problem to the larger extent. Yeah. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think everyone's already pretty much covered, what we've discussed so far. And yeah, I would just like to add that, from my experience of working in an organization which is still very, young, we're still changing what our organizational culture is. We're still trying to figure it out. I completely agree. I think, things like being inclusive or being diverse, these are actually, these might be, they have become buzzwords now, I feel. But I think that when it's a part of your culture, when your leaders are actually, walking the talk, when they're actually incorporating it in everyday behavior, that's when, these changes actually happen. And you don't need elaborate policies. I definitely don't think we need more things more laws, coming out or getting introduced. I think what we need to start doing is just sort of changing our behavior and, lending that empathy in our everyday, workplace environment as well. So, yeah.
Amita, don't kill me. One
No,
thing.
no. Yes, please. Just quickly wrapping up.
Yeah. The one thing that all of us need to do is not only internally, but externally build a culture where we, sorry to say that, but we as women or collaborating with men go out and start helping. Start helping new budding talents to grow, help them, guide them, mentor them. Help is really crucial today. So, in whatever way that's possible, internally and externally.
Right. Absolutely. So I thank all of you for taking the time to be here to share your thoughts and views on this critical topic. Not only this was a great learning session, and I'm sure I speak for the audience as well. This was a very thought-provoking session. Thank you to all of you. Over to you, Anubhuti.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amita, for that wonderful discussion. Lots of takeaways again. Thanks to our panelists, Bhavna, Mansi, Megha, Mithul, and Pooja. Moving on to the last session for the day, which will focus around community over competition and why is collaboration the way of the future. The panelists for this discussion include Anuradha Roy Chaudhary, Head of Corporate Communications at DP World, Vishnupriya Narayan, AVP Corporate Communications and PR at Dream Sports, Madhvi Bhel, Head of Corporate Communications at First Source, Priya Zutshi, Corporate Communications Lead at Green Cell Mobility, and Flovie Martins, Head of Communications at Marsh McLennan Global Services, India. Moderating the panel today is Sharmishta Ghosh, Vice President at AVNV. Over to you, Sharmishta. If you're just giving it a few seconds to allow everyone to join in. Hi, Sharmishta. Hi, Vishnupriya, Madhvi, Priya.
Hi.
Hi,
You
Madhvi.
can take over now, Sharmishta. I think the most of the panel is here.
Sure.
It's over to you now, Sharmishta. Yeah.
Would you like to introduce the speakers as you had said earlier?
I just did.
can do that
I have
too.
already introduced the speakers.
Okay, cool.
While you were waiting backstage, I'm going to go backstage now and the discussion is open.
Sure. Thank you so much, Anubhuti and Promise Foundation team for organizing a session on something which is so important and very close to my heart. Why is collaboration the way for the future? What does this really mean?
Well, we all know that COVID impacted the economy and further diluted the essence of equality and equity. While it exposed us to so many layers of flaws, this unimaginable crisis brought together different stakeholder groups to create competitive and innovative partnerships addressing the common call of humanity. Through this panel today, we hope to advance an in depth conversation on this binding power during the current crisis, as well as how it will play a very, very significant and pivotal role going forward to forge future pathways based on trust, values, knowledge, empathy, and resilient partnerships. So, this entire panel has been divided, the discussion will be divided into two parts. In the next 35 minutes, the first part would focus on me asking some of the panelists, the experts, about the examples that they can potentially share around opportunities, innovations, and disruptions surrounding partnerships and better connect with stakeholders that emerged during COVID 19. And the second part is more futuristic, where we will be discussing future strategies. What are those measures that we need to have in place to ensure that all the learnings that we have had from this unfortunate pandemic is something that we don't lose and doesn't fall through the cracks? So I'll start the discussion with the first part of the panel, and I'll start with you, Anuradha. Anuradha, people, businesses, planet were deeply impacted during COVID. So, what are some of those learnings and reflections that you have from the last 24 months around prioritizing sustainability and impact on communities and environment? If you could share some examples with us. Anuradha, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, I was saying that 2020 was really a catastrophic year for many of us. I mean, almost all of us, and personally, many of us have been affected. We've had uncertainty, mental health challenges, existential struggles. Everything has been part of our world. I think most of it, what I've felt is that in this world's recovery has to be based on two things. It has to be equity and sustainability. No one should be left behind. I think the learnings or the reflections, if I do within this past 2 years, would be that many of us have been fortunate enough to be in a position where we have been supported well in this pandemic. Unfortunately, this unprecedented human crisis has been, very, very tough on many segments of the society, and we all know that. And that's where we have to step in, and organizations, government, uh, partners, NGOs, community partners, all of them, we have to come together. And I think that's what has been shown in this 2 years, how people have actually collaborated, the power of collaboration. This one thing, if this pandemic has taught us and should have taught us, is the power of collaboration. It was not an easy task to probably feed people who didn't have food, or get vaccines to people who didn't have access to vaccine. So be it basic necessities or vaccine availability, all of this needed the power of collaboration. And we have seen multiple examples, governments, organizations, the police force, the medical community, everybody came together. Cross sector and public private government partnerships, I think these were very, very key. These actually came up. I'm sure these were there before pandemic, but if you see during the pandemic, cross company collaborations, different organizations tied up with their own strengths. So, people brought to the table things which they had access to. Somebody had huge distribution network, they use that. Somebody had network for food and beverages, they use that. So all of those strengths came together. I think building blocks of the economic recovery or the recovery from the pandemic with this collaboration, equitability, having a focus on equity, and focus on sustainability. It has to be the core, because so we have seen that what's happened during when we were all at home, what had happened to the environment. There was so many things around the environment which was being told that it's really really progressing and improving. The economic revival cannot be at the cost of our planet. No one should be left behind, so that's equity. And economic revival cannot be at the cost of the planet, and that's very very critical. Sustainability has to be at the core, be it where we have global efforts of identifying and developing any treatments, medications, vaccines to fight the pandemic. Governments, businesses, NGOs, communities, everybody must need to work together. I think that's truly important, and that cannot fall through the cracks. So I think another thing which I wanted to kind of come up with is that during this pandemic, one of the learnings which I have had and I have seen is that there has been a lot of focus on trust. People have actually built and look forward to forging relationships and trust within the community, which could be, if we all refer, and we've probably all seen that, if you refer to the Edelman Trust Barometer, it says that the mistrust has grown. Yes, it can happen. It has grown because of certain issues in terms of resource mobilization, but trust can be built. My learning, or you can say, I reflect on this, that we all say that we have started working remotely, right? So interpersonal connection, face-to-face meetings have reduced. That is also, in a way, actually, there are people who we probably not in the hall corridor or office corridors, we would have spoken to them, we've asked about their health, we would have empathized with them with their loss. There has been a lot of connections which we could build. I think that's critically important, is building trust, interpersonal trust, trust within the public-private partnership I was talking about earlier, where trusting the organizations which we work with, our partners. That's very important, because they bring in the expertise. Today we do not, as a single organization or a single entity, none of us will have the gumption or the reach to do what we want to do in terms of economic recovery or outreach, community outreach. So sustainability, keeping sustainability in mind, if we need to really work together, we have to build trust with our community, with the community partners. We need to have a long-term multi-pronged approach towards recovery. So, of course, if you see, the United Nations have focused on the ultra vulnerable, millions and millions upon people who are the least able to protect themselves, needed support. And it has been disproportionately affected the poor. The virus has affected the poor, the homeless, and people without resources. So not one solution will actually fit them, and we have different outreach programs. We have communities within our sphere of influence. We have communities outside our sphere of influence, which typically is something which we work with, right? Organizations work with. How do we leverage this? We leverage this by collaboration, which I was talking about earlier again. So building trust, collaborating. How do we collaborate? We collaborate by exchange of expertise. An NGO, for example, or a community partner will have probably reach, but you might have the expertise which you can lend to them. So, sharing, collaboration, trusting them to do the right thing by you and the right thing by the society is very, very critical. I think that's really, really important. And that's something which I wanted to kind of, touch upon. Uh, One thing which comes out and stands out from this is that, policy, if not properly addressed through policy, social crisis created by COVID-19 pandemic may also, increase inequality, exclusion, discrimination, and global unemployment across. Having social protection systems, these have emerged. How much of importance a comprehensive universal social protection system in place is important, and that's something which is like, works as a stabilizer to the economy. If you need to really grow, do economic recovery, that will be very, very critical. So that would be my take on this.
Thanks, Anuradha, for sharing your perspective on playing on strengths with multi stakeholder partnerships, building trust to ensure that nobody is left behind. I will now move on to Vishnu Priya. Vishnu Priya, what are your views on communications? Since you are a communicator yourself, what are your views on communications playing a significant role in ramping up partnerships for creating better connect with individuals, society, and community at large?
Sharmishra, you mentioned earlier that the importance of community has come to the fore more than ever before in India, and with similar and broader implications everywhere else. If you look at teams at work, sure, technology-based communication platforms have become more commoditized and accessible than ever before, and they've built all of us a rapidly growing addressable audience. But at the same time, as the disruption continued in the second year, systems and processes were being replaced. We saw systems and processes being replaced by individuals and teams who were then working in exceptionally selfless circumstances to ensure that colleagues are supported. Again, sure, business continuity and crisis management models, we had to deploy them, on a daily basis across the nation, not just companies, but governments and, what have you. But they were also enhanced by the model behavior that managers and superiors sought to do the right thing by their teams and their people. Even if you look at family members at home, the nuclear family fabric was tested to its last fiber. We had to find composure and patience in dealing with each other, in addition to space and additional space and flexible time, and to match the demands of homeschooling for some of us, elder care, domestic chores, the whole medicine, supply chain management, etc. Um, then if you look at the neighborhood, frustrations ran really high when the RWAs were deemed to be putting in overreaching in their imposition of COVID safety regulations. India even today is devolving into a coalition of districts every time the new lockdown. Every time a new lockdown regulation comes in place, but somehow still we have been able to find our way around guidelines and use freedom to get through the unlocks. And finally, but not least, the friends of friends networks, the role that support groups have played using social media and finding support, delivering help, even sharing grief was remarkable. So we all have stories of how we got information when we needed it, shared AI driven tools, channeled Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp updates to the most in need. And through these heart wrenching stories, the thing that you will find, the instances of pure human kindness have always come through. So in all of these cases, in about the last 24, 26 months, you'll see that collaborative rather than competitive communications has been the thread that has tied us together, kept us together as a nation.
Thanks, Vishnu Priya. You touched upon something very important, which is the role of technology. How technology helped in amplifying reach, delivering help, and also sharing grief, be it through WhatsApp or by connecting with doctors through, telemedicine services. This brings me to the next question to Flovi. Flovi, your views on the role of technology in adapting to challenging times. How do you think it, played a significant role in improving access to the right information and services? And what else do you think one can do to bolster this further to create, better impact for greater good?
Hi, everyone, and good evening. And first of all, thank you to the team for inviting me to this forum. So, technology per se is a vast subject. For the purpose of this conversation, I'll stick to digital technology. If I were to ask right away, show of hands, how many people know toddlers around them with a smartphone in their hand and using it nonetheless, I think 90% of us would raise a hand. So that's how far the adoption and adaptation of technology has reached. It's become that easy to use your smartphone devices. If we are also talking about adaptation, I think today if you go to the farthest village in India, along with buying a Parle G and a Maggie, the same vendor might probably also be selling you a broadband connection. With that, what has happened is the adoption of different services has also reached over there. So I think we all know how the pandemic, pushed the adoption of technology, whether someone liked it or no. I know so many people who were aversive to using wallets. Like, I don't want to use a Paytm or I don't want to use a GPay. But after a point, you just could not ignore it. When the lockdowns were announced, or even now because of social distancing, I think we've all got adapted to ordering groceries online, to making payments online. Touching upon social good, actually, on that part, I remember there were so many people who wanted help and momentarily, and it was just possible to transfer money right away or to create a group. Like certain apps have gone to business nowadays and transfer the money there, and they could get it when they needed, and not 10 days later when it would have been irrelevant. So that's what technology, or rather digital technology, has done. I actually see ourselves 10 years down the line being in the position that our parents are in, and probably our children being in the position that we are in, struggling to adopt with the latest technology, because it's changing and becoming exciting to adopt and easy to adopt that quickly every day. So while I spoke about the good of digital technology, I would also want to touch upon the dark side of technology, which at least we all have heard about. And the two things that come to my mind is fake news and security breaches or data breaches because of the apps that we download. So I would just say that as corporate communicators, we have the opportunity to educate people. Being in the staying in metros, we have these conversations quite frequently in our circle, but probably our colleagues or people living in tier 2 markets do not know it as much. So somehow, through our work, if we are able to have these educative sessions for them. I mean, HR is doing so much around social well-being, sorry, just well-being, wear a mask and all of that. Why not invite people to actually talk about how fake news is spread, how data breach happens? And they're very simple things. Just an example, you download an app and you give access to the app developer to have access to your camera, to have access to your contact list, by just probably keeping an option off even on your phone device that cuts the third party access to your data. But these are small things that people don't know which matter. So education on using technology is the way to go forward, because people will be adopting it as it gets simpler to adopt further, and with broadband reaching to all the corners of India. It's just that adopt as needed and move with caution is how I would view digital technology.
Thanks, Plovi. Thanks for talking about the adoption of services and technology, and also inventing, reinventing as we progress with time. This brings me to the next question to Madhavi. Madhavi, how important it is to keep reinventing systems and processes that demonstrate a culture of learning and collaboration. I think, Plovi, you also spoke about it. What are those strategies that you think we have adapted in the last 24 months to create this ecosystem that really nurtures collective spirit, and thereby creating enablers that lift each other up? If you could share your views on that.
Sure, Mr. Good evening, everyone. What I'll do is, Ramesh, I'll just step back a bit and set a bit of a context. The fact is, even before the pandemic, we were seeing a tremendous rise in the concept of the shared economy, right? You have entire systems, business economies, and business models built on the spirit of collaboration, whether it's Airbnb, whether it's fraternity, even an Uber. What the last 2 years have done is they've simply phenomenally accelerated that leverage of technology and brought into various further aspects of our life and at the workplace for sure. And now to your question, by definition, learning is a continuous process, right? Therefore, upgrading of the systems and the processes that allow for that learning, constant reinventing of those systems is critical. To address your second part, how did okay in first source, I'll give you an example of what we did across three aspects in how we drove collaboration in three different aspects of work life balance, if you want to call it that. The first would be what we did was we set a series, and it's a continuous thing that we can do even now. We set up a program called a hackathon where we could ask people to come together to build a prototype or suggest an idea or a solve for a particular problem. And these people need to be across geographies, across functions, businesses, age groups, roles, etc. Right? That brings them together to look at one particular problem from a diverse set of eyes, therefore bringing in that concept of you're learning and you're collaborating towards one particular agenda. That was one aspect. The other example I want to bring about is the more lighter one. It's about a global fitness challenge that we developed which is basically a 12-week program which gamifies fitness. You have to form a team of six which is diverse, and you are given a particular weekly goal, and you come together to attain that goal. Obviously the overall goal is fitness, but what it does, it enables people who've never met and interacted to get to know each other, to motivate each other towards that goal, and to support somebody else's goal in their fitness journey. So that was a huge success as well. The third piece, I think, which some people will question whether it's really collaboration, but I do believe it is, because it's about coming together for a particular intent. Is what we did is we saw a lot of interest in people wanting to do stuff for those in need. So we developed a host of employee volunteering programs across various interest factors, where people come together and give back to society as a collective. So basically, what we've done is to summarize this, what we've done is we've built an ecosystem that allows people to collaborate and learn across work, which is the hackathon, across play, which is the fitness challenge, and across giving back to society, which is volunteering.
Thanks, Madhavi, and thanks for sharing some simple yet impactful examples of how engaging employees to lift up their spirits not only help the organization to make an attempt to create an ecosystem for learning, but also create shared value. During the first question, Anuradha had touched upon climate change and impact of climate change, rather. Priya, my question to you is that, the recent, as we have seen in the recent comprehensive assessment report that was issued by IPCC yesterday, India is among the places that will experience these intolerable conditions as we go along. There will be impact on Mumbai and many other cities within India. What do you think are, we all know that these climate change indicators have in fact worsened in the last few years. And if after COVID, something that really needs emphasis and thrust is climate change resilience, or, mitigating climate change impact. How do you think multi-sectoral partnerships can drive climate change discourse and action? Your views on that?
Just actually, thank you so much for having me, first of all. So, just to reiterate what Sharmisha has said, basically, the challenge at hand is what the UN Secretary General has called that 2022 will be emergency mode for us. What this means for us is basically that we need to do whatever we had planned according to the Paris Agreement. We had made so many commitments during that time. Now is the time to act on those. We know that we'll have to almost half the carbon emissions that we were supposed to happen in 2030. We'll need to half them by 2030. So the challenge at hand is immense. What is required is the learnings that we have had in the climate change movement, basically, so far, whatever we have seen. So I'll just give you some examples of how it has worked, what successes we have had. First, I would want to go to the LED lights. So we all have them now in our lives. It was not very long ago that we didn't even know what was the advantage of LED. But now, because of the governments coming together, with the civil society coming together, as well as the private sector playing a huge role in it, that's why we have LED lights today across the country. India is a very big success story on that front. Secondly, the solar energy story. So what we are buying currently, the solar energy rates right now are lowest in the world as far as India is concerned. So that's an amazing story to copy. We are seeing the third intervention we are seeing is electric vehicles. We are seeing almost every big player in the mobility sector now entering electric mobility. There are solutions in this space, and we are seeing the changes very fast. All this is thanks to all the people coming together. So it's thanks to the government playing their part on the policy front. It is thanks to the private sector taking the onus of actually telling the story to the consumers, and of course the private sectors who have understood that this is the way forward. Like time and again, we are talking about the recovery post COVID needs to be a green one, an inclusive one, like Anuradha spoke about. All this will be only and only possible if we look at the climate change story, and we are able to, as communicators, talk to the wider audience about it. But I think that it's a very good example of how all the three PPP have come together, and we have seen success in this. So I don't see what could we possibly. This is the biggest example we have of success as far as partnerships go. So I hope that we'll take these learnings on a journey forward too.
Thank you, Priya. I think very good example, and definitely communicators and the role of communication will further be elevated as the world sees more challenges, and therefore communicators can play an important role in educating stakeholder groups rightly and getting them together. Well, thank you all for a very well on encompassing discussion. For the first set of questions that we had, it is important now than ever for individuals, organizations to reevaluate their stance to forge stronger partnerships with people through their initiatives, be it with employees or with the environment or communities, apart from products and services. This brings us to the second part of the discussion today, and as we come to the second part, a quick spotlight on our expert panel. We all know that in the last 24 months, and we've discussed that in the last 10 minutes, how organizations today are instituting mechanisms together or with other organizations to engage better with employees, local communities, other stakeholders through meaningful partnerships, collaborations with shared vision for a resilient future. What, according to you, are some of the most important measures that we must, nurture or assimilate to ensure that none of this that we have learned in the last 24 months fall through cracks in the post-COVID era? And I'll start with you, Priya.
Sure. So instead of the fallout, I would just say the learnings that we've had. So I'll focus on those. First of all, Anuradha spoke about interconnected communities. All the panel actually spoke about, even Vishnu, Priya referred to it. So we have learned that communities are very interconnected. And as communicators, we'll need to see how this pans through, how we can tell that in our storytelling. Secondly, would be the shared value story. That's the most powerful story we as communicators have an opportunity to. If there's ever been a good time today, right now is the time to actually talk about the shared value story, because everybody seems to have understood it. Thirdly, the technology as an enabler. So Flovi talked about it, Madhvi spoke about it. So though that actually technology can be used for greater good is something that we have found out. Of course, there are adverse effects, but as communicators, if we can enable the conversations around how technology can be done for greater good, I think even my sector, which is the electric mobility sector, has a lot of learnings that we want to see how technology will play out. We still have a lot of obstacles, or you can talk about needs and requirements as a sector we have from technology, and we hope that technology can actually be used for enabling a lot of things in my sector specifically. But I would say that technology as an enabler is something that we've learned, and that can be a way forward for us as communicators to talk to the consumers at large.
Thanks, Priya. Over to you, Madhvi.
Thanks, Mishta. I'm going to end up sounding quite similar to Priya, but what I would summarize is the first thing I think that will help stop, not allow this agenda to fall through the cracks would be a shared agenda, a shared vision, a shared purpose, which brings all of us people, everybody, all stakeholders together. And I think as communicators, we have a very important role to play in sharing that or bringing alive that sense of purpose or agenda for the entire organization or community. The second would be ensuring that there are, like Priya mentioned, the right infrastructures available for people to collaborate. Especially in the world that we live in today, we need those resources, etc., to enable people to come together, because the intent may be there, but without the infrastructure, it's invalid. The third thing I would say is it's not related to communications per se, but it's required for an organization or an entity is to build the sense of collaboration into the measurement system, right? You reward team effort, you reward teamwork, you build a performance management system that is not just individualistic, but that acknowledges and recognizes the collaborative effort that went into delivery. That's
interesting.
It.
Flowy, your views.
So I'll actually talk about employee communications. And during the pandemic, I think there was a lot of focus on employee communications because organizations were struggling to keep their employees motivated during these 2 years. Now, what I have noticed is that people just started rushing into all different channels of communication. So I'd say number one, choose the communication platform or engaging platform that you think is relevant or that you actually need. For example, just because someone else is using Yammer or it's the talk of the town, it's not necessary that you should also adapt to having as many modes of communication as required. Two is, once you have a channel of communication, have a long term strategy and keep changing that strategy and evolving as required. Again, if I just take Yammer as an example, just launching it for your employees is not good enough. Just look at it 3 months from now, is it sustainable with content? Otherwise, it's a dead platform to be on. So, a sustainable strategy for communication, number two. And the third point, very importantly, is take a notice of over communication with employees. We keep speaking about it every time, everywhere, that employees get a lot of mails. Then there are WhatsApp groups, and there is a company intranet. If you're a global team, there's a global intranet, and then these are the small chat boxes that we have on the side. So over communication does not translate to anything else but spam folder to the employee. So to keep that in mind when you're designing and sending out content.
Makes sense. Vishnu Priya, your views.
Yeah, so everybody on the panel has spoken about how we need to create, a sense of shared set of values and accountability. And I'll just add that, while this is important, we must focus on creating a sense of shared set of values and accountability while also preserving individual autonomy. That's important. Today, we also understand, what it is to live, work, and engage as one community. So we need to build deeper interactions within our company, our users, our partners. So we need to keep empathy intact. The third thing is that investments in science, doing business the right way, proper corporate governance, these things matter more than before. So we need to keep that spirit of authenticity and experiment intact. And we need to ingrain in the importance of community as a competitive advantage rather than a competitive rat race. And so we need to keep the teamwork and collaboration intact. Those would be my three key takeaways.
Thank you, Anuradha, the last one to go here.
Yes, and I unmute myself. Okay, I think it's quite similar to what I think, and I've heard everyone. It's really same. I would take a leaf out of what Priya said in terms of shared values, and Madhavi touched upon shared agenda. I would say creating a shared economy should be the shared purpose we look at. So creating a shared economy, good for everyone, greater good, and which brings me back to my first point, which was about equity, equitability, and so being inclusive. So be it employees, be it a government, public private partnerships, wherever, I think the focus needs to be on inclusive growth in a shared economy. Of course, keeping sustainability as the base of it, because that what means is to keep a long term view. So you look for sustainable growth when you take a long term view. So taking a long term view, having inclusive growth agenda build a shared economy and leverage technology, which Flovia talked about, and that's very very important. So that gives a sense of pride to all of us, as a nation within a global economy. Building a sense of pride and inclusivity is the way to go forward.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your valuable inputs. And I've personally learned a lot during today's session. And as communicators, as all of you mentioned, there's a need for us to enable conversations with a measured approach on interconnectivity, interconnectedness, right resources, shared values, purpose, using technology as an enabler for greater good, acknowledging each other, organizations, institutions, not as competitors, but as peers, as ecosystem builders, or as social actors, and not losing the emotional, empathetic touch when we are trying to create inclusive growth together in a shared economy. So, thank you so much for your time today. And personally, I'm taking back a lot of learnings from all of you. And with this, uh, we conclude today's session, and I hope the audience found the discussion fruitful and informative.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Sharmishta, and thank you to the panelists, Anuradha, Vishnupriya, Madhavi, Priya, and Flovi for this wonderfully crafted discussion today. With that, we have come to an end of IICC 2022. I now invite Julia Joseph, part of our extended team and an alumna of the School of Communication and Reputation, SCORE, to propose the vote of thanks. Julia?
Thank you, Anubhuti. On behalf of the entire organizing team that includes Shreya, Sarika, Amita, I would like to thank all our panelists, moderators, and you, the attendees, for being part of the India Impact Communications Conclave, the Women's Day Special. I'm sure all of us are going away with a lot of key takeaways, learnings, and thought provoking ideas. I sure have gained a lot of insights today. This conclave was presented by Comms News and powered by Reputation Today with support from Spring Batch of SCORE. I thank all our supporting partners, Ideosphere Consulting, ICCPL, Kalolwala and Associates, Seraphim Consulting, Talking Point Communications, and the Pivotals. In a few weeks, we will curate the Influence Now Communications Conclave. Stay tuned for more on that. Next year, we'll be back with another edition of IICC. Until then, please follow us on Twitter at commsnews_ and RepTodayMag to stay updated on our upcoming online and offline events. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening ahead.